Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first, big live event. We're super excited, and we all hope we're doing this right also, since it's our first live event. But we're super, super excited for today. We have an incredible lineup of speakers that are going to talk about their book entry. So if you're new and you've not been involved with Women in Analytics before, I'll give you just a brief rundown of the organization. So we've been around for the last 6 years. And what we do is essentially create a platform for women to talk about their work in the analytics space. So we're trying to provide more visibility. That is our mission and our goal as an organization. So we do that in a lot of different ways. We have a conference that we host every year, which is in 2 months. And we'll have a promo code for everybody attending today if you want to join us for that. It's both in person and virtual. We also published this book, Analytics Interpreted, which was our first book that we published, and we had 45 women authors contribute to the book. So you'll hear from 12 of them today, which is really, really exciting. In addition to that, we also host free webinars for folks, anybody who wants to attend every other week. So you can subscribe to our newsletter and keep up to date with us on that. We also have a community that anybody can join for free. And we post lots of resources in there, have tons of conversations about what people are struggling with or having challenges on. And, there's a lot of collaboration happening in that community platform. And there's also paid options, paid membership as well, if you're looking for a little bit more engagement, a little bit more kind of one-on-one time with experts in the industry. So lots of ways to get involved with Women in Analytics. But today we're here to talk about the book. And as I mentioned, we had 45 women authors. We're super excited to kind of go through them. There were 6 different sections of the book that covered things like data management, modeling, inspiration, strategy, ethics. And so we're going to touch on a few of those sections and hear from the authors themselves and be able to engage with them, ask them questions. So if you are tuning in, take advantage of this time while you have it to ask the questions directly to the authors. I'm sure all of them would love to connect with you, so find a way to connect with them after this event as well. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Lauren quickly to do a quick introduction of herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Burke. I'm the Director of Operations of Women in Analytics. I'm very excited to be here today. We have a ton of really awesome authors here to talk about their submissions. And I hope everyone, if you enjoy this today, you become a more frequent member of the WI community, whether it's through membership, attending our conference, or just hanging out in our comment section and meeting other women and individuals in analytics and data.
Awesome. And Kelsey?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. My name is Kelsey Dingelstedt, and I am the Managing Director for Women in Analytics. I want to just thank everyone who is joining us today, especially our authors who have contributed to this wonderful book. And just to play off of what Lauren said as well, we'd love to have you join the community. We'd love to see you at the conference this June as well. So definitely join our platform. We'll keep you in the loop about all the other great things we have going on.
Awesome. And before we jump into things, I also want to pull up Dave Cherry, who was a key contributor to making this book even possible. In fact, it was his brainchild. So I'm going to pull Dave up and he can talk a little bit about his contribution to the book and his inspiration behind it.
Thanks, Reagan. Appreciate you having me on here and really excited to be here. I'm an advisory board member with Women Analytics. I've been in that role for I think about 5 years now with Reagan and Lauren and the whole team. And I think it was right before the pandemic hit that this book idea started over coffee with Reagan and myself. And I remember thinking to myself, I have this crazy idea. Reagan's either going to love it or she's going to hate it. And I should have known better because she loved it right away, because this book was just an idea of a way to create another platform for all these amazing women leaders in analytics. And, sort of if you think about, as luck would have it, the pandemic hit. And unfortunately, we weren't able to host our conference, but we were still able to create a platform. So, we've got, our book here, and hopefully everybody's got a copy of this thing. And it was just such an amazing response. So once Reagan and I were excited about it, we thought, okay, this is great. Let's put out a call for authors. And we put it out and we said, I wonder if anybody's going to respond to this. You know, we got our first response, like, great, one person was excited about this. And then we got another and another and another. And what was so cool about this was we had a handful that were friends, you know, women that we had met through Women Analytics. We knew and we were excited about them. We thought, okay, these were some people. We sort of expected a few of them. And then we started getting more and more from women that we'd never met before, women that were all across the globe, an incredibly diverse set of people. And we thought, this is fantastic. We sort of just put out this idea and the responses were amazing. And as Reagan and I worked through the editing process, one of the things that I'm really excited that you guys are going to get a little bit of a taste of today is the excitement that Reagan and I shared. We would get a submission in, you know, she would read one and then shoot me a text and say, Dave, you got to read this one. This was so cool. And I'm like, okay, I got to go read that. And then I would be the first one to read one and say, Reagan, you got to read this one. This was even more amazing. And like, we kept having that interchange over the course of the editing process. And it's just so amazing for us to be able to bring these authors to you live. You know, Reagan and I are really just a small part of it. It's really a testament to each of these women who took the time to share their expertise and their knowledge. And they're now ready to do that for you live. So I'm going to stop rambling on here and just, you know, again, Reagan, it's been one of the highlights of my career working with you and Women in Analytics and all these fantastic women that we've gotten to meet. And I just can't wait to hear from these authors. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Reagan, and we're going to introduce our first author. So thanks again.
Thanks so much, Dave. Yeah, I echo everything he said. This was a really fun process. We're just curators. We didn't really make any significant contribution to the book other than that. The really good stuff in the book are from the women authors that are presented in the book. So super excited about that. I see we are getting some questions too about where to find the book. So if you go to Amazon and you look up Analytics Interpreted, you should be able to find a hard copy of the book there. But also, if you are interested in potentially winning a book, we're going to have a lot of opportunities for you to enter in throughout this entire event. I think there's 4 different opportunities and 2 winners per opportunity or raffle to get a free copy of the book. So make sure that you're using the hashtag. We'll walk through the instructions on that. Hashtag WIA Coffee Convos. And if you post it in wherever you're looking, wherever you're watching this from, so YouTube or LinkedIn or Twitter. I don't know if it works with Twitter, but definitely YouTube and LinkedIn. Post the hashtags in there, and then you should be able to enter into that raffle and win a free copy of the book. So look out for those opportunities. It'll happen, like I said, 4 times throughout this entire event. So if you're staying tuned in, you definitely won't miss it. And with that, I'm going to introduce and bring up our first speaker and author, Barb Wickson. She's at MIT, and she's got a really incredible background. I'm going to let her kind of do an intro for herself, and then we'll jump into the conversation. If you have questions, post them. We'll be reading through the questions, and I'll definitely relay them on to Barb. So with that, Barb, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Reagan. Thank you to the whole team. I can't imagine more fun over coffee than to talk about data and what an incredible field it is. And it's interesting. A lot of times you hear about tech and that it's male dominated. Personally, I have been fortunate for close to 30 years to always have women in my life. I've either studied incredible women leaders in data, worked side by side with women collaborators in data. So I'm not sure if I'm an anomaly, but I feel actually very much that we have a rich, deep bench of women when it comes to data and analytics. And also, I have to giggle when I come out, you know, as the MIT principal research scientist. That's who I am. That's what I do. But I started out 30 years ago, or actually more than 30 years ago, undergrad, as a religion, English, Spanish major. So I just want to make it really clear that getting into data does not necessarily mean you have to start off even at STEM. There are so many different opportunities in data that can really bring out creativity and problem solving and other skills that, again, might require religion, English, Spanish. You never know. So my essay, I'm really excited, Reagan and Dave, you did a great job of putting me in the inspiration section, because the reason I made it from my undergrad background to today as a principal research scientist, and my topic is data monetization. How I got there is because I've been inspired along the way. I let what I observed and in data inspire me. One of my very first case studies when I was a doctoral student was about Continental Airlines. Old story, but Continental, they were a terrible airline. They were 10 out of 10 out of all the airlines. They had 10 CEOs in 10 years. They called themselves the perfect 10. I mean, it was actually hard to be that bad back then. They were terrible. And they had a turnaround CEO that came in, and basically they went from worst to first in the industry. And then they went from first to favorite. And then they became the most innovative. And I studied this over years. And what we found was the role data and analytics played in that exciting journey. And that is the kind of inspiration, or that's what I've been inspired by all through my career, all 3 decades. It's seeing these incredible stories of what can be, and that it can be, and then how can it be. And what my research today tries to do is help everyone have that kind of success in the initiatives that they embark on. And as I say in the essay, it's actually kind of simple. Well, first thing I always say is you got to focus on the value. It's not actually about data and analytics at all. If you focus on something that's really compelling and what really jazzes you up, individually, what gets you out of bed, as an organization, what really is the reason for your mission. When that's the focus of what you're doing, and then you happen to bring data and analytics and your own kind of data persona to that scenario, that's what creates the big win. So Reagan, I'm sorry, I'll let you jump in. I could, as you know, probably talk for 8 hours about how wonderful this space is.
No, that's great. And for the folks that are tuning in too, so Barb's submission was creating value from data is exciting when done acceptably. And kind of rereading through this recently, because the book came out over a year ago now, which is crazy to believe. The thing that I absolutely loved about it, well, a couple of things. First, I have to start by saying, if you read the section, you'll know that you put the fact that you rapped to students to get them excited about data.
Back in the day, it was a hard sell. And I knew I was right. I knew that everybody needed to understand data because I was teaching general business audiences. And so I had to go into MBA classes, for instance, and just passionately try to articulate why this mattered to them. And yeah, sometimes I had to rap, whatever it takes.
What would you say your rapping skills 1 to 10 in terms of getting people
they have
pumped
remained at kind of a negative level. But, sometimes the shock value, that's really all it takes. So, yeah, I would say it was shock better than quality of the rap.
But I agree with you. Getting people excited. I think right now there's a huge hype cycle happening. So people are excited. They want to use it. And in a lot of those cases, it is a hammer looking for a nail. And I'm sure a lot of us are very familiar with that. And so to your point, the whole part of your submission is bringing value from data, which seems obvious, but is one of the hardest things to do. You mentioned 4 key elements to focus on in your submission too, that I want to bring up. And I'd love to hear how you came about coming up with those, and essentially. So having a compelling need, leadership commitment, behavioral change, and measurement were the 4 that you mentioned in your submission. Can you talk about those a little bit?
So collectively what you want to do. So first of all, it takes a while. Data is not quick. Analytics isn't quick. It takes time, right? And hopefully what you're trying to do is ultimately change a scenario. You're trying to create change ultimately, right? That's where value comes. And we all know that change is hard. I mean, even just personal, individual change, it'd be hard for me to stop drinking coffee in the morning, right? And so what those 4 levers do collectively is, first of all, they're compelling. They make sure that always there's a motivating reason to keep going, even when times are hard, right? Or there's a reason to keep everyone's attention on very clearly where we're going. So that the measurement is again helping us continue to have feedback about if we're going the right way, do we need to adjust, and then about keeping the momentum as well. And at the end of the day, everybody wants to be a part of achieving something that matters. And again, this goes to the value. So at the end of the day, what I don't like hearing is people getting excited about data itself. And, let me tell you about my data. And I have companies all the time. We have great data. And I'm kind of like, you know what? I really don't care if you have great data, honestly. What are you doing? Tell me what you're doing and what are you achieving? And then we can talk about how exciting it is of the way in which you're creating that achievement.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's one of the hardest things. I got into the data and analytics space because I was a very technical person, engineer by trade. I didn't really want to talk to people. And then I realized, well, maybe that's probably not a great field to be in because it really mostly is about people. It grew on me. I ended up really liking it. But at first it was, I was very hesitant because of that. Like to your point, it is about changing behaviors and understanding kind of the emotion behind it and the intention of individuals. And that was a little bit hard for me to at least initially understand when I got into the field, because you just think about all the cool techniques and all the things that you can do. Like I loved solutions architecture for a long time because it was just so black and white.
But I'll tell you, a lot of times the simplest solutions are just fine. You don't have to be sexy all the time with what you do with data. Sometimes just very simple kind of approaches is all you need. And that's great. So
yeah, I totally agree. I'd love to ask one more question too while we have you. And a reminder to the audience as well, as you have questions, please throw them in the comments. I can see all the comments coming in. So if you do have questions, throw them in there and then we'll pull them up on screen. So towards the end of the submission, you mentioned that you had the ability to sit into some sessions with practitioners and leaders in the space at MIT. What were the biggest surprises to you? And then what were the biggest misunderstandings or most common misunderstandings those leaders had?
I am so blessed with being able to closely interact with people who are practicing this stuff and big time leaders. And I think, what we all are trying to, first of all, the big surprise is, how much we need each other, meaning academia and practice together. Magic happens when we are bringing really deep understanding together with those who are in the trenches. And if either group is trying to independently do stuff, kind of falls flat, if you will, right? And so that's the first thing, is how much together we can figure things out. And so I guess my one pitch to the world is, if you're in practice, please work with your universities and academia. And if you find them irrelevant, then that's even more of a reason why go work with them, please, so that they become right. And then vice versa. I hope academics out there are really engaging with practice to make sure that things happen. So anyway, all the time surprises come out of working with this group. And most recently, just to give you an example, at MIT, we tend to do things like fancy and we try to be really like edgy and all that stuff. So I was doing all this cool stuff with data sharing across companies and, how to do that in different arrangements and motivational levers and, all. And when I came back to my group and I was sharing what we learned, they were like, Barb, that's great. Interesting stuff, cool stuff. But can we kind of focus inside? We can't even share data inside the company. Can you kind of help us with that first? And then we can work on all this fancy stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's really good. So actually that's what we're working on this year, is a big study on, cross-company data sharing inside the firm. So anyway, together, I'm hoping that we continually understand how we can better work with our data in ways that create value. But that's the kind of stuff that comes out of those types of interactions.
That's awesome. I want to thank you so much. The 10 minutes goes by so fast. I can't blink and then we're here. But thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us today. And, if you want to follow Barb, find her on LinkedIn. Is there anywhere else they can find you to connect with you?
If they go to MIT CISR, so cisr.mit.edu, all free resources, educational resources for anyone who wants to learn more about data and analytics from a strategic perspective. Please enjoy all of our work.
That's awesome. Thank you so much again. I appreciate you being here. And with that, I'm going to pull Lauren up too to introduce our next speaker. So thank you again, Barb.
Thank you.
All right, Lauren, I'm going to pass things off to you to introduce our next author and speaker.
Awesome. Thanks, Reagan. All right. So our next speaker is Jen Schilling. She is a senior research analyst at the University of Arizona. Her submission is featured in the case studies chapter, and it's titled Making a Difference with Dataviz. And you can find it on page 219 of the book. So let's bring up Jen and talk to her.
All right. Hi.
Hey, Jen. I'm really excited to have you here.
Thanks.
I'm sorry. So if you want to
Oh.
jump in and give a little bit of an introduction to yourself and your submission, we're really excited.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I'm Jen Schilling. As Lauren just said, I'm a senior research analyst at the University of Arizona. I work in a department called University Analytics and Institutional Research. I'm also an adjunct faculty member at the College for Creative Studies, where I teach graduate classes on data visualization and R. I began my career actually as an operations research engineer in the supply chain, and I also worked as a statistician in market research. Then I took a little bit of a detour from analytics, and I served with AmeriCorps working in college access, and I taught middle school for a few years, which was an adventure. And then 2.5 years ago, I returned to data and analytics, and I joined the University of Arizona. And in my role here, I do data visualization, I do dashboard design, and predictive modeling with institutional data. And then I also work as a data visualization consultant to support organizations working in college access. And that's where my chapter in the book actually came in. So my chapter in the book called Making a Difference with Dataviz, it's about my experience creating a dashboard for the Arizona Commission for Post-Secondary Education, which has actually now become part of the Arizona Board of Regents. But basically they have this Fafsa challenge in the state. And the goal is to, broadly, the goal is to increase Arizona residents going to college. And a key step in the college access process is completing your FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. And you have to fill that out in order to qualify for grants and loans from the federal government. And also many colleges and universities require it for qualifying for financial aid. And so part of this Arizona FAFSA challenge was to find a way to track the weekly FAFSA completion rates at high schools across the state. So that's where I came in and built this dashboard that allows us to look at the FAFSA completion rate at the state overall, track it at different counties, and then also track it at the individual school levels. And there's a few different pages in the dashboard that allow for different comparisons and tracking of different metrics. So that's kind of broadly what the chapter is all about.
That's awesome. So what, with that visualization that you mentioned, that Arizona FAFSA Challenge dashboard, can you talk a little bit about how you found out there was a need for it and some of the impact that came from it?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess one thing that I learned specifically when I was working in college access and in secondary education, but kind of something that I've seen throughout my career is that visualization can really help with seeing patterns, making data visible. It also makes it can make it more accessible for people who are not so comfortable looking at kind of numbers in the table. And so when I've been working in college access, I've made some dashboards just for the little organization that I was working with. And when the FAFSA challenge came around, they said they thought, well, we need some way to kind of share this data with people. And then because of that work that I'd done previously, they got in touch with me. So that's kind of how I found out about the opportunity. And then thinking about how to make it so that it could provide this way of tracking against the goals, but also be really easy to for individual schools and individual leaders at college access organizations to kind of get to the information they needed. And so it was a lot of working with my primary stakeholder at the Arizona Commission for Post-Secondary Education. And then through her collaborating with some of those school counselors, and we would kind of have this iterative process of creating some pieces of the dashboard and then sending it out to them for feedback, finding out what they thought, getting their feedback and integrating that back in. And so it's really kind of this whole I really like the design thinking process, and I like applying that to my dashboards of like you empathize with your users, you define the problem, then you kind of brainstorm and prototype, and then test things out, and then finally you kind of do the whole implementation. And so that's kind of how we approach this. And then I think you asked about the impact it had as well. Sorry, I just kept talking so long. I was like, what was the other part of the question? So the impact that it had, one was that before the dashboard was available, it was hard for schools to access all of this data. It is available through a federal government website, but individual schools had to pull their own data every week. And if a district wanted to pull data, or say a college access organization wanted to look at all the schools they were working with, they'd have to pull all of those schools individually. And so the dashboard provides like one location and they can find everything that they need on it. So it helped with ease of use. It also increased the visibility of the challenge. And so because there was this dashboard and it was on the website, anybody could go look at it. It made it really highlighted the importance of completing the FAFSA and made it really visible that, hey, we're doing this challenge. We really want to increase FAFSA completion rates. Publicly, here's our goal and here's how we're tracking towards that goal. So that was another really big impact of the dashboard.
That's really interesting. It sounds like the dashboard was a very impactful addition to a way to just see all of that data. And I'm sure anyone who works with data knows that I don't think anyone can look at a data table of raw values and find anything meaningful with that unless it's a very, very small table.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you find anything from that dashboard that surprised you within the data?
Yeah, I think one thing that has been really interesting, well, I don't know if it's surprising, but something that's been interesting is we can definitely see the impact of COVID pandemic. So we created this dashboard before that. I think the first school year we did it was 2018, 2019. But it might have been 2017, 2018. I can't remember now. But so we had the dashboard in place before then. And part of doing the dashboard is we now have all of the historical data as well, because we keep it, the way we keep the dashboard up to date is it's built in Tableau and we use Google Sheets as the kind of back end part. And every year we refresh it with the setting it up for the new school year, but we save all the old data files. And so when you pull the data down from the government website, you can only get the current school year and the previous school year. But because we've been keeping these data files for several years now, we have a history of 4 years, I think maybe 5. So you can really see the impact of how FAFSA completion rates dropped a lot in the past couple school years because students weren't able to, well, in a lot of places weren't going to school in person. It was a lot harder for counselors to reach out and connect with students. And then also, I mean, for any number of reasons, there's lots of financial like difficulties that came from the pandemic and everything like that. There might have been less students, kind of planning for going to college. But certainly the access of counselors to students was a challenge, and we could really see how the FAFSA rates declined in that year. So that was something that was been kind of pretty interesting that came out of it.
That's really interesting. So it also sounds like the data where you're pulling it from, it isn't saved anywhere. So before you were saving it and compiling it, there was no real storage of that data for the year over year sort of look back. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that the federal government does have it somewhere in a database, but yes, from what you can pull down, like as an individual, you can only pull down the current year, and the spreadsheet that it gives you includes the previous year. But yes, there wasn't necessarily like a historical record of Arizona school records of the FAFSA completion rates. And it's nice because it comes down weekly and then it goes through the whole FAFSA cycle from October 1st to I think it's June 30th is usually when we kind of stop tracking it for the year. So you kind of get a final, like, okay, this was every school's final completion rate. And we can show that for every single school year going back in time, which can also help. I guess one thing I didn't mention is another impact is it helps with goal setting, right? You can't set goals if you don't know where you are currently or where you've been. And so that's another really key part of the dashboard that helps it. It provides this tool for tracking and for goal setting.
That's such a good point. It really speaks to just the impact one visualization can have when you have all of this sort of disparate data that no one is able to look at in a combined sense. And data visualization really gives you that opportunity to bring it all together and help it make sense to people. We did get a question that I think is really interesting. Did you include any sort of design thinking principles in this visualization or in previous visualizations? Yes.
So I guess design thinking principles. So I did, I do incorporate kind of the whole design thinking process of those kind of 6 steps that I mentioned a moment ago. And I do really like that for applying it to dashboard design. And I don't think that that's something that we always think about, especially when, like I have a very technical background. I think Reagan mentioned a moment ago that her background's also very technical. And so when you come at things like this from a very, like my background, math and computer science heavy background, I didn't necessarily learn design when I was doing my education. But that's something that I now bring in because I know the importance of thinking about the user and like empathizing with the user to start with and really understanding their needs. And then bringing in that define step, which really helps because then if you clearly define the problem, everyone's on the same page and you know where you're going, and then following along for ideate and prototype and test. And so yes, I do try, and sometimes I incorporate that more formally than other times, but it's definitely like a process that I kind of think through in my head a lot. And I really think it has nice applications for dashboard design.
That's awesome. That's a really good thing to mention too. I also am from math and computer science, and you really don't have a lot of the user thinking. You're building the systems for the user, but usually that then goes on to another person or another team to think of that side. But with data visualization, you're really kind of covering all of it. So we're about out of time, but I did want to ask, is there anywhere that people can find you, to follow you or connect with you?
Yeah, so thanks so much for having me, first of all. This has been really, really fun, and I'm really glad that I got to, 1, be a part of the book, and 2, be a part here. It's been really great chatting with you, so thank you. And yes, I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at DataScienceGen with 2 N's. And I have an out-of-date website, but it is jenschilling.me. But you can then find my Instagram too, where I like to knit and sew and drink tea. So if you want to hang out with me and do that, you can find me on Instagram. On Twitter, I'm more talking about Dataviz stuff. So, but yeah, I'd love to connect with everybody. And thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us, Jen. And I'm going to turn it back over to Reagan to go on to our next speaker. I think you're on mute.
I am on mute. That's so I don't ruin it for everyone while I'm in the background. Thanks so much, Lauren. And thanks again, Jen. I'm going to pull Kelsey up here as well. So just as a quick recap, we've had a couple of authors speak so far, and now we're going to take just a quick break and do one of the giveaways. So I saw a couple of people submitting already. I just want to create a reminder for everyone, if you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, to comment the hashtag. Kelsey's going to pull it up here on the screen for us. I think it's WIA Coffee Combos. So if you put that hashtag in the comment section, you're automatically entered into the raffle to get a free book. So that's super exciting. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and let Kelsey do the drawing. So take a second, throw this hashtag into the comments. And once you do, like I said, you will be put into the raffle so that you can get a free book from all the authors that are presenting today.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. If you're just joining us, I am going to share my screen here, and we will do our first drawing of the event.
I see tons coming in. Good. That's awesome.
Oh, great. That's me from testing it, so hopefully that one doesn't end up being the one that wins. Awesome. I'll give everyone like 5 more seconds to get those in. Awesome. 3, 2, 1. Go ahead for our first one here. Awesome. Congrats, Michelle. I will reach out to you on LinkedIn to set up a way to get you your new book.
Woohoo! This is really neat.
Yeah, I know.
You said it was cool. It actually is really cool.
Awesome. And then we're going to do one more. Awesome. Congrats, Amber. This is so fun. I love this.
I love the confetti. It's great.
Great.
We should have put the background music like we said yesterday. Throw some jams on there once the confetti goes.
Maybe next time.
That's so great. You should totally look into that for the next one. Awesome. All right. Thanks, Kelsey. And with that, we're going to jump into our next author. So I'm going to pull Lauren back up onto the screen, and she's going to introduce our next author. So Lauren, take it away.
I'm on mute too. All right. Hi, everyone. So next joining us is Michelle Mirage. She is a senior systems analyst at Lyft. Her submission is featured in the Data Visualization and Business Intelligence chapter. And the title is Training Teams on Data Visualization. She's also going to be speaking at the Data Connect conference in June on adding context to financial dashboards. And if you're interested in reading her submission, it's on page 172. So thank you so much, Michelle, for joining us. And I'll turn it over to you for a second to introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your submission.
Of course. Thank you so much as well for having me. And so exciting to see so many, I guess, like data visualization authors as well, just following Jen. But yeah, hello, everybody. Nice to see you all on this lovely morning. I'm coming to you from San Jose, California. So it is 8:30 for me, a little bit early, but super excited to be here with my coffee too. And so a little bit about myself. I do currently work at Lyft, the rideshare company, and I'm on the financial planning and analysis team. And so my job there is on the finance side. I help build and maintain Tableau dashboards. And so I used to be in consulting before that. And so I was at Crow in financial crime analytics. And there I was on the data team where I really help teams extract data from whatever type of system that they are using and get something useful out of that data that they were looking at. But when I submitted my section to this, or my chapter to the book, which excited to share, I have right here. When I submitted my chapter, I was still working at Crow. And one of the experiences that I had was I was really involved in helping doing a lot of internal training and helping put together classes on teaching data skills and really focused around data visualization. And the reason why I wanted to write this chapter was because as I was teaching some of these sessions, usually, 1 hour during like an entire week conference, maybe like a 30-minute webinar. But what I realized was it's really challenging to teach the fundamentals of data visualization because there's so many different areas that contribute to like building your skills in data visualization that it's really hard to figure out what you need to focus on because there really are just a lot of fundamentals that you have to keep in mind. So for example, I did try to have a class once where I wanted to just teach Tableau, teach people how to use like the Tableau tool and how to format their visualizations in it. But what I found was people were really struggling with creating summary information or creating pivot tables. Because for those of you that have used the tool before, you'll know that to create a lot of data visualizations, you usually first have to summarize the data in some way, shape, or form. And then you can build essentially a data visualization on top of that. And what I realized was if the people in my class, the analysts, didn't understand how to create a pivot table, how to build those intersections, it was really challenging to get them to that point of, hey, you're going to leave the class with a complete data visualization because you have to have those fundamentals before you can get there. And it's quite a big of a leap. Then another example that I had was I was trying to lead a class on a little bit more of an advanced class, but like teaching dashboard actions and how you can get different charts to interact by clicking on each other. And again, what I found is some of the analysts in the class were wondering why their actions weren't working. And it was because their data wasn't joined properly. And so that was just like another example of where I realized, okay, we can't just jump into teaching people how to use a tool. We want to make sure that we build up that data literacy first in order to get there. So in my chapter, I do talk about some of those other background areas where you want to build those skills. And I do think it might be helpful for if you do decide to teach a course on data visualization, you want to make sure that either your audience has the skill level for what you're trying to teach, or maybe you could focus on one of those areas to start with. And that's where I was coming from.
That's super interesting. One of the things you mentioned was that a statistics background is useful or maybe even kind of necessary for creating a really good visualization. So kind of going along with that, what other kind of key aspects of your sort of skill set for creating successful visualizations might surprise people?
Yeah, and so I mean, I think I do talk about 5 different areas within the chapter, and so I don't want to spoil too much, but the different sections that I talk about include, like Micah mentioned, understanding, like having that data literacy, so really understanding the data and how to format it to export it in the way to build your visualization. Statistics is really important because a lot of data visualizations are an aggregation of your data in some shape or form. And so having that statistics background and knowing what types of aggregations make the most sense for your data is going to be really helpful. Knowing the tools that you have access to, but then two, that you can build those skills on is going to be really helpful, because not every company is going to have access to the same tools. It really just kind of depends on where you're working. Having that design background is going to be really helpful. And so once you get to the point where you have a visualization, can I actually make it presentable and interesting to my audience? And then finally, that storytelling section. And so I have a really interesting visual, but does it give me the information that I need for whatever purpose I'm trying to present it for?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So do you think data visualization is essential for successful communication of insights in an organization?
I do think it's really, really helpful. And so, I mean, there are definitely a lot of other factors that probably go into that successful communication. I mean, having good data in the first place is going to be absolutely crucial. And then like other types of communication skills are going to be really helpful. But I do think that data visualization and having data visualization skills are one of those things that are really just going to set you apart from either like the rest of the people they're presenting, or really just push your presentation, like make it that much more insightful and that much more interesting. Because even though you could maybe get your point across without a really strong data visualization, having that really powerful data viz is going to help just make your presentation that much more easier to understand, get more people involved. And so it's definitely one of those skills that's good to have in your back pocket.
Those are all really great points. So I don't know if everyone knows, but Michelle has participated in the Women Analytics data visualization competition a couple of times and placed. So she very much knows her stuff. But what sort of led you to getting into data visualization?
Oh my gosh. And so for me, my background, I feel like data visualization is that perfect combination of all of the different, areas, career paths that I was really interested in growing up. And so for me, I used to want to be a graphic designer. I did a lot of graphic design classes in high school, but I wasn't good enough to actually make any money in it. I don't think I was probably good enough to even get into art school, but I was really interested in art. Math was this topic that I was the strongest in. So I was really good at math, really liked graphic design. And then I also spent way too much time on my computer, just online. And so I really liked technology and the internet and all of those things. And so for me, when I started school, I actually studied in business administration before I realized that information systems is an actual major that you can study. And as I was working on my information systems degree, I realized that data visualization is that perfect combination of all of those different areas that I've been growing up really interested in and really loving. And so it just felt like the perfect place for me to like spend my time and to really invest my interest in, because I just love all aspects of it, all those different areas.
That's awesome. And I think that makes a lot of sense. I also would argue that you definitely have the artistic and design touch, because I've seen your visualizations and they are always really, really interesting to look at. I know you're on Tableau and I know you tweet a lot about your visualizations. So we'll give you a shout out at the end, but people should definitely go check out some of the work she's done, because it's really awesome. Sort of going along with that, what has been your favorite visualization you've ever created?
Oh man. And so I definitely have to say it's kind of challenging, because especially since I started my job at Lyft, I've been doing a lot of internal visualizations that have been kind of cool, but obviously that's, internal Lyft. So I can't really show you guys that kind of stuff. But my favorite visualization that I've posted online is the one I submitted, I forget what year it is, but I did submit it to the Women Analytics Dataviz competition. And it was, what is it called? Traveling the World with Nellie Bly. And so I had actually I wasn't going to enter the Dataviz competition, but I was watching an episode of Drunk History where they did an episode on Nellie Bly, who was a woman journalist who wanted to travel around the world within 80 days. And I thought, well, the episode was hilarious, but I thought it was really cool to see her journey. And so I looked up, she did actually have some data online of like where she traveled, how long it took to get to all those places. And so I thought it'd be really neat to turn that into a data visualization. And that was my first Tableau Viz of the day, which was super exciting. For those of y'all that are Tableau developers, essentially Tableau does pick like different visualizations in the community spotlight. And so it was really cool to see my Viz spotlighted by Tableau. So that was probably one of my favorites for sure.
That's so cool. I actually remember that one. You made it look like a newspaper, and I had never seen a Viz like that, and I thought that was super interesting. Let's see. So I know you've talked a little bit about storytelling, and without giving too much away, why do you think storytelling is so important and so core to creating a data viz that people actually look at and learn something from?
Yeah, and so I can't talk today, especially in consulting, what you find is that people sometimes get into the habit of just creating a lot of charts that don't necessarily mean anything. And so I've definitely seen presentations, or honestly put together presentations that have maybe been the same chart over and over again, but maybe with like slightly different filters or slightly different tweaks. Or maybe we present a chart just to be able to have something else on the slide to fill up some of that white space. And those are examples of not effective data visualization, because they're really just, they're space fillers, and it's not helping contribute to whatever message you're trying to get across. And so I do think that having that storytelling aspect and actually thinking about, okay, as I'm creating this visualization, what is my purpose behind it? Because it's going to be a waste of your time, and it's going to be a waste of your audience's time if you're putting together visualization that doesn't necessarily either help contribute to your presentation or tell you anything insightful. And so you don't want to waste your time. And so really think about why I'm putting this together, how it's going to be used, what message am I trying to get across, and thinking about that story as you are developing your visualization is really going to help make it that much more impactful.
That's a great point. I know I'm not particularly in or great at data visualization, but I can say that some of the data visualizations, the best and most sort of beautiful data visualizations I've ever seen have been very streamlined, very simple, but they communicated what they're trying to get across so well with such a sort of simplicity that it's really awesome what you can do with it. So we're almost out of time, but I would like to thank you so much for being here. And is there anywhere that people can follow you or connect with you if they want to learn more about your data viz?
Of course. And so LinkedIn is probably the place where I'm most active. And so feel free to add me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to keep in touch with everybody. And then I also have a personal blog. I'll send it in the chat a little bit after I get out of here, but it's called The Shell Curve. And so TheChelle, and then curve, curve.com. And on my personal website, a lot of people do ask me, like, if I am interested in data visualization, how do I get started? What book should I read? And so I do have some resources on there that's really easy to just point people to. And it has some of my favorite books and everything that people are welcome to look through if they're interested.
That's great. I love that you've already thought about sort of the questions people might be asking. And that's awesome. I know data viz is kind of a tricky thing to get started in, because like you mentioned in your article, which I encourage people to read, there's a lot of different aspects to it that you might not think about. And it's a lot more complicated than just kind of throwing together a simple pie chart. But I really appreciate you being here. I think I and everyone learned a lot, and I will turn it back over to Reagan and Kelsey.
Make sure to mute myself. Thanks, Lauren. You'd think I'd be good at it by now. Awesome. So I want to introduce the next speaker. So we have Selma with us today. Her topic is on from the business case to the people case, how the right people in the right places can transform your organization. So I'm going to bring her up with me. And I'm going to let you do a quick introduction of yourself, and then we can talk about your article a little bit.
Thanks. And I have to give a little bit of a warning. So it's spring break week and we're traveling. Just like Michelle, I love Tableau and data visualization. So we can pretend that these bubbles behind me are like the bubbles on the density charts and not a booth at a fast food restaurant. But it's pretty quiet. So I'm so excited to be here. And just for some background about kind of my journey in the analytics space and why I was inspired to write the piece about the people cases. I've worked at several organizations, I would say kind of at the onset of their analytics transformation and their transformation into like kind of just the digital world. And throughout those right, like experiences with those companies. I've sat with leaders and listened to them really ideate on business cases and think through kind of like return on investment of kind of answering the why, right, behind certain questions. They would talk about data a lot, right? Sometimes I'd hear them kind of say, well, let's just implement this, machine learning model and all of our problems will be solved. And less often, I heard people talk about the people that were necessary to transform the organization, right? To make the organization more analytically mature, to really deliver that ROI. And I felt like just probably across the analytics space, that was a big gap. So Barb was kind of talking about this at the beginning of her presentation, that she doesn't really care about data. Like, she doesn't care how good data your is or how much data you have. She's more interested in like why you're trying to answer this question, right? Like what the why is, right? What's the why behind the why? And I think Michelle also hit it right before me when she was talking about using data to tell stories, right? And it's about the storytelling aspect of it. My lens and my piece covers more of like, who are those storytellers, right? Like, who are you going to empower in your organization to tell those stories, to really drive that culture and transform your analytics journey?
Yeah, and I love that you outline that. I think, we hear a lot about people who want to put an emphasis on the technology. It is one of the easiest things to evaluate, right? Like it's very cut and dry in some cases. And so I think looking at the people and who makes up these teams is super important. Do you have the right people in the right seats on the right bus going in the right direction? We hear that a lot in terms of making sure that everybody is where they need to be to solve the problem. These problems are extraordinarily complex. They're very contextual. And so I love that you outlined it. In your section, you outlined 3 individuals that specifically that should be included in these conversations. So you mentioned the data translator, the storyteller, and the data scientist. Can you talk a little bit about why you picked those 3 and what each of those mean?
Yeah, and so I think that as a lot of the organizations kind of transform to be more agile and lean, we tend to have like one person wear all of those hats, right? So we kind of say, hey, you have the technical skills and also kind of understand the implications of the data. So I want you to both be the translator of the data, right? Which we can think of somebody like who, this is a more technical role. What we in my organization, we kind of consider these folks the data engineers, right? So they're taking the data from several different sources, they're wrangling it, they're cleaning it, they're making sense out of it, right? So we want you to do that, and then we also want you to do the data science, so build out the models, right, and build out kind of these learning processes, right? And then once you have all of those results, we want you to tell the organization what to do about it, right? And that's a really tough task for one person. And I would say that there are sometimes unicorns that can, do all 3, but not effectively. And so I would kind of caution any organization that is on this analytics journey and they're trying to kind of, again, push the curve towards more analytical maturity, to really think about hiring within those specific roles, but have them kind of separated out so that people can play, right? Like play within their playgrounds. So I would say that, like I said, the data translator is really kind of that data wrangler. They're taking the data, cleaning it, making sense of it, really getting it ready to model. The data scientist needs to be somebody who has the sound training, right? Who really understands, again, the implications of the model to the business. They need to have a good statistics background, and kind of, right, there's this safe area that we need to ensure we play in, where we don't just like build any type of model and say anything is going to be like, here's the data and do whatever you want with it. So this data scientist really does need to be somebody who's a little bit more academic, who again really understands the implications. But then that storyteller is the person who kind of like brings it all together and then translates that to the business to say, hey, here's what we're seeing out of the data, here are the trends, here are the predictions and recommendations that we would give to you. And they tell the story in a way that the business leaders, it really resonates with the business leaders and they can action on them.
Yeah, I think that's so key in terms of all the key areas that you're talking about and trying to get, create an environment of collaboration between those three individuals, because I am by no means a data scientist or an academic or a researcher. And I have a little bit of depth in statistics, but not super deep, and really thrive in being able to translate this finding that a data scientist had and trying to get that to be meaningful to the user so that they can action off of it. What do we really want to do? I think we get really a lot of business users get very deep in the weeds. Like, if only we knew this one thing. Okay, if you knew that thing, what would you do with that? And that typically they don't have an answer for. So I love that you said start with the why. Like, why do you want to know that? What are you going to do if you magically understood that? And you highlighted two other points that I want to make sure we get to as well. You said you think that organizations should enable business units to do their own descriptive analytics. And then you also mentioned that organizations should prioritize or curate use cases or projects which have a business champion and a quantified business impact. So can you talk to both of those points? Why are they so important?
Yeah, so I think, right, particularly with the digitalization kind of transformation that was accelerated through COVID, companies had to start thinking about, right, like how do we adapt, right, now with all of this data and the shifting patterns that our consumers are kind of taking on. So we are no longer kind of in the space of just saying what happened and kind of comping to last year, particularly when last year was like the pandemic, and so it has no bearing, right? We are now more concerned, I would say, by and large, organizations at the top level are more concerned about telling us what will happen and how can I influence that. Right. And so it's more predictive and prescriptive that we're looking to do. So if we're really kind of zoning in that kind of top right quadrant of our analytics maturity chart, we need to enable, right, descriptive analytics doesn't go away. We need to give our business users the tools so that they can self-serve, right? Because they still need to know what happened. How does that comp to some of the baselines that we have that are industry standards, right? So I think that was really important to me too, and that I don't think that gets lost in the maturity scale, right? Like, we still need to do that, and I think it's important that we enable, again, business users to self-serve. And then when I talk about the business champion and the quantifiable ROI, again, sitting with business leaders and listening to them really ideate on the business cases, they think through a lot about kind of what's important to the business, right? Like, what are these top business questions that they really want to answer? And then they put a lot of money behind it, and they drive really kind of fast deadlines. Once those projects come to fruition, so I would say, like, we can do anything with a lot of money, right? But what happens afterwards? If we don't have the business champions to, again, really tell that story of the model, that analytical solution that we've developed becomes unused, right? And there is no ROI that is realized. Even if at the onset of the project, we had identified the ROI. So we had said, right, like, if we are able to predict, for instance, customer cancellation rates, which is a project that I had worked on in a previous organization, if we were able to predict, right, like how often or which customer orders are more likely to be canceled, and we know that we can influence that so that we can reduce that rate, right, we're able to see a return on investment in, like, I don't know, 10%, right? If we don't do anything with that model, if we don't action on that, we're never going to realize that ROI. The people are the ones who are helping us action on it, right? Like, they're the ones that are pushing that action across the organization. So it's really critical that every use case has a business champion.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're hitting on two key areas. Who owns it, right? At the end of the day, who's going to drive action against what we're seeing? How can we get an ROI? And I'm seeing tons and tons around this idea of democratization or self-service layers, enabling more and more of the organization to be empowered by the use of data. So we are at time, but Selma, thank you so much for joining us, especially on a vacay. Really appreciate that. And where can people find you or follow you?
Yeah, I would say I'm most active on LinkedIn, and so I'll be sharing some of my thoughts there and anything that's happening with the Life at Carter's. I'll be presenting at the Data Science Connect conference, which will happen later in the summer, and then I will also be next month at Vegas. I won't be presenting, but I'll be there. So if anybody will be at the Tabloid conference, chat me. I'm excited to meet all of y'all.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Thanks so much. And I appreciate it again. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye. All right. I'm going to bring Lauren back up so she can introduce our next speaker. We are just doing one after another. We got to get through 12 of them. So Lauren, with that, I will let you go ahead and introduce our next speaker.
All right. Hey, everyone. So I'd like to introduce May Alwash. She is the Chief Data and Innovation Officer at Gulf Bank. Her submission is featured in the Model Preparation chapter, and it's titled Understanding the User Journey with Event-Based Models and Digital Analytics. She has also spoken at a previous WA conference, and she has some really interesting things to say. If you want to read her article, you can find it on page 131. So I'll turn it over to you, May, if you can introduce yourself and give us a little bit of an overview about your submission.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So as you said, I'm the Chief Data and Innovation Officer. The innovation was just added this year. Last year I was pure Chief Data Officer. And what that means, honestly, is everything data when it comes to, data quality, analytics, setting up platforms for everyone in the bank, BI, all of that good stuff that, making the data available for everyone. All departments, making sure that they have the valuable data that they can analyze and monetize on. When I wrote this article that's featured in the book, that was in my previous life as a digital analyst, which wasn't too far, just over a year ago. With digital analytics, we've always kind of been struggling, and as Selman and Michelle mentioned, kind of the telling stories behind the data. We've been always struggling with digital analytics when we want to tell a story, because the user sometimes is joining on the web, and then he's joining again on the app, or then browsing from his phone, and then trying to stitch around all of these different pieces of the story across different platforms. That was always a problem. And we end up trying to convert some metrics here and change some dimensions there. But in the end, there's so much lost in translation. And by the time we get to a data set where we put everything together, it's too late to act on the data. And one thing that we have emerged in that field, in the digital analytics specifically, is kind of the user-centric. And it's all around, not just digital analytics, but the digital analytics tools kind of been moving into the model of switching away from looking at users as a visit or as a session versus moving into a user-centric model. And with that, we no longer call app kind of screen views versus web pages. We call them page views. There's always just views. And that's kind of where things started talking well together. Screens and webs, they all have kind of similar metrics, similar dimensions that we can mesh together. It's no longer when we try to create something in any of the analytics tools, when I try to create kind of a container it doesn't ask me anymore, is it a web or an app container? It just say a container. And that's kind of was the solution where we now can look at these metrics together and be able to tell the story across different devices. Of course, it comes with lots of challenges, the way we track things and the way we kind of identify the user across the journey. But if there's a will, there's a way. And that's kind of what the article is about, and how the user-centric modeling and the events kind of help us enable that cross-channel, across the journey, and also get over some other problems that we face when we don't know if the user is logged in with all these recent privacy frameworks that we have to comply with. So some of the event-based models kind of help make the analytics valuable, even though the users are not logged in. Now, one of the things that I've always kind of focused on is when we talk about app and when we talk about web, how can we make the two mesh together for instant insights? So one of the things is I give the example of Netflix, for example. When you're watching something and you're skipping on your OTT on the device, kind of whatever it is, if you're watching on Apple TV or anything, and then when you open Netflix on your phone, it starts suggesting other things because you're skipping, or it starts suggesting things that you've been watching, and that's kind of synchronizing the information that's on your phone versus the TV, or whether you're watching on your iPad. The quick sync of all this information is what enables companies to really act on the data fast and be able to monetize that data without having to go through the time to do the conversion.
That's really interesting. It sounds like customer analytics and digital analytics has really seen a kind of major shift in the way you're looking at it in the last few years. So what sort of innovations are you excited about going forward? I know you're not directly in digital analytics anymore, but what sort of things have you heard about that seem really exciting to you?
So yeah, now one of the things now one of the units that I have in my data office takes care of pure digital analytics and enabling all of our digital platforms to talk to each other, and then enabling our social marketing, our kind of media marketing, or even intranet to really use the digital analytics data and kind of focus on the customer journey across. A lot of the innovations that I've seen recently, first, we've seen this shift into the user-centric modeling. Even the giants, like Google Analytics have been there forever. And it's finally just this year, maybe actually a few weeks ago, they announced that they're actually retiring the classic Google Analytics, which depended on that session and kind of separate sessions or separate devices, in favor of their new GA4, which is very much a user-centric model, or the customer analytics, basically, which, something that everyone has been prepping for the past few years, but it was not officially kind of announced that the old model of separate platforms, separate devices has been totally retired. And now people have to get off of this and move into the user-centric modeling. And that kind of introduced just that the fact is events and user-centric is here to stay. And that's where everything is going. And, we've seen a lot of the apps kind of get on this because it makes it so much easier if we have just one model to work with. Because previously our app was running on, I don't know, some other platform, whether it's Firebase or anything. And then we had some Adobe Analytics on the website. And these are two different platforms. But one of the things that I've seen is the emergence of new platforms that kind of feed in from all these different platforms that use whatever analytics interface, whatever analytics tool that you use on your app. You can all put it in one device, and then also pull in the offline information data, whether you have something from a CRM or something. Previously, that was very much matured for non-digital, but now it's the digital has been kind of going into engraved into this and being part of. It's considered a major data source, and it's not considered a different bubble than what's happening offline. Because we always look at the online customer and the offline customer, or the customer who comes to the store and the customer who's online. But I think with the pandemic, everybody who was offline came online. And that's where, really meshed the picture, they're really one customer. We can't look at them separately. People are now, everybody is online. And everything has become that user centricity is valuable, but that considering offline and online is not as hard as before. It's really easier to do this, and it saves a lot of time for digital analysts and anyone working in data. But it just helps us make those the monetization and the innovation that we can do with data is much faster. We turnaround will be easier.
That's really interesting. Yeah, it definitely seems like they're sort of building on and even accelerating some of those changes and making them really quickly very much user user-centric instead of any of the other ways they were looking at it. So I know you recently, or maybe not super recently, the last few years have felt like a blur, but you recently transitioned into a chief data officer role from digital analytics. So with that transition, have you brought any of those sort of core principles of digital analytics into that new role?
It's definitely was a change, but I think, after I met few chief data officers, a lot of them were in e-commerce and digital before. And I was like, okay, so probably that is the path. I don't know. But I think the digital analytics really was the first, I wouldn't say kind of more mature, but the first people who really had a lot of data that was, a smaller data set, probably better quality data because you collect that data while the user is just browsing online. And then the way that we were very much monetization was ingrained as part of digital analytics. We always use what the customer do so we can personalize their experience. We use the data to actually run the advertising campaigns. It was all about the monetization of the data. Organization who had data warehouses living, they were using them for reporting, for analysis, kind of after the fact things, but not really the real time monetization. And now that everybody's waking up to this, that we can monetize the data, it doesn't have to be just online. I think one of the skills of the digital analyst is that they have this as part of their DNA, that I'm always collecting data to make more money. And that's where every other organization is trying to do. And banks, one of the new and up and coming, because a lot of the chief data officers that I know in banks are first generation. So it's a new practice in the finance industry to be just on the monetization end, because we don't sell stuff online. People access their accounts, or people do some stuff, but it's not like we're e-commerce focused. So taking that monetization view, kind of the digital analyst can bring learning from e-commerce and apply it here. And I think it's you gotta sell the monetization to businesses who are not used to running e-commerce. And I think with the digital analytics background really helped me be in that mode that I'm in love with monetizing data. Let's see how it can work in a finance industry, or in a banking. What can we do to actually optimize? How can we personalize the user experience? Their focus usually is things that happen offline, where the customer spend with their cards. Customer demographics is really easy when you're a bank. You know everything about the customer. It was just the idea of, okay, we have all of this data. How can we monetize it, but really be ethical around the usage of this data as well?
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's interesting to see how many sort of organizations are now thinking of what they do as a product sort of sense. And when you do that, you then start to think of your users or anything as a customer. And so I think a lot of those principles you were talking about apply to really a lot more areas and industries than people have previously thought. So it's really cool to see all of those sort of innovations you're talking about being able to be applied to a even wider variety of industries and sort of specific companies than we previously thought. But I wanted to thank you so much for being here with us today. And if people want to follow you or connect with you, where can they do that?
So I'm always active on LinkedIn. So please find me on LinkedIn and connect with me. Semi-active on Twitter. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best way to find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, May.
Thank you so much, Lauren. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right. And I will turn it back over to Reagan and Kelsey.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. And with that, we are already at the next giveaway phase, which is great. So we did one before. Please make sure that you resubmit your hashtag. The counter will count it every time you do it. So each time we do this giveaway for the book, as if you're just tuning in, the hashtag is scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So if you are on YouTube or LinkedIn, just throw it in the comments. Hashtag WIA Coffee Convos, and then you get entered in to win a free book. So we had 2 winners from the last round. We're going to do it again, and we'll have 2 more winners this round. If you miss out or need something else, we can or have to attend to something else, you can always come back in and do it in the next 2 phases as well. So with that, I'm going to pull Kelsey up so that she can do the really fun confetti thing that we did last time.
I have the best job out of this whole thing. I get to play with virtual confetti. Okay, perfect. Let me screen share here. I'll give everybody just a few more seconds to get their hashtags in. I love this tool. It's so exciting. Okay, perfect. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's see who wins here. Awesome. Jot this down here. Congratulations. I will find you and we will figure out how to get you your book. In round 2. Michelle again. Okay, I'm going to draw one more. Awesome. Congratulations. Stay tuned for a comment or a message from me, and we will get you your book.
Awesome. Great. Thanks so much for entering in for that. And with that, we'll keep going down our list of authors. So thank you, Kelsey.
Yeah.
I appreciate you pressing the button and letting the confetti fly.
No problem. Anytime.
Great. Awesome. And, I mentioned this before, but I'm going to give everybody a quick reminder. Feel free to throw questions in the comments. I see everybody having conversations, which is wonderful. Keep doing that. We love to see conversations happening. We're hoping that a lot of these discussions will spark more conversation, allow you to connect with other folks that are tuning in. So as you listen to the speakers and you have questions, throw them in there. We love to hear questions. We'll throw them up on the screen and we'll address those questions. So and with that, I am actually going to pull Lauren back on to the screen, and she's going to introduce our next speaker.
All right, so our next speaker is Alison Magyari. She is a manager of IT dedicated application platforms at Eaton. Her submission is featured in the model preparation chapter, and it's titled Analytics plus Design Thinking equals Game Changer. And so if you're interested in reading that, it's on page 161. So now I'll bring Alison up, and is Alison here? There she is. Hey.
Hi, Lauren.
Really glad to have you here with us today. I'm going to turn it over to you to give sort of an introduction to yourself and a little bit about your submission.
Great. Thank you so much. So yeah, thanks everybody for having me today. I'm Alison Magyari. Like Lauren said, I work for Eaton Corporation, and I've been there for almost 9 years, and about 7.5 of that was spent in the analytics space. So I went from being a business analyst to a manager on that team. And then just over a year ago, I switched to the infrastructure side of IT. And have been working with the dedicated application platforms. So things like our mainframe, AS400s. So it's a little more technical than what I was doing in analytics. But yeah, I'm really excited to be back here and to talk about something that I have such a passion for, which is design thinking. So why we got started with design thinking at Eaton was that in the analytics space, we had a lot of projects that we were rolling out. And we would put so much blood, sweat, and tears into those projects and thousands of hours. And what we were finding was after we went live, a lot of the times our adoption rates were incredibly low. And we saw that our users were going back and doing Excel-style data dumps back out of the tool and doing analytics kind of on their own offline. So we couldn't really control the data accuracy. We didn't understand what decisions they were making. And so it became rather frustrating, honestly, because we spent so much time up front to see very little, I'd say, in results. And so design thinking, what drew me to it and what I loved about it is that it was bringing in 3 pieces to it. So empathy, of really understanding what are the business users going through on a daily basis and how can they benefit from data decision making. And that's something that we weren't really doing before. We were, in a lot of ways, just kind of blindly recreating reports that had been used for many years in the past. So I love the empathy piece because a lot of times when I saw what our users were doing, it scared me into thinking I would never want their jobs. It was so high stress with pulling data from multiple sources, manually compiling it, always being a little bit unsure if it was accurate. Planning their vacation schedules around month end because they knew they had to do data polls during that time. So it just seemed like a position that I wouldn't personally want to be stuck in. And so I really liked the design thinking from the empathy. And then also a big piece of it is iteration as well. So acknowledging that a lot of times our users don't request exactly what they need the first time from a business analyst or an analytics department. And acknowledging too that IT a lot of times doesn't get it right on the first try either. And so what I love about the iterative approach too is it allows both sides to say, you know what, now that I see it, you gave me exactly what I asked for, but it needs a little bit of tweaking to really be able to be actionable off of it. So it allows for that wiggle room and a lot less stressful for both parties, I would say, both business and IT. And then the last part of design thinking is innovation too. And I loved being able to really start to think outside of the box in terms of, okay, we've always looked in the past. How many units did we sell yesterday? How much did we collect from our customers yesterday? And maybe starting to make a switch to be a little bit more proactive too. So I think there's a lot of interesting pieces with design thinking. And the other thing I love about it too is we used an approach where it was what is, what if, what wows, and what works. And so in the what is stage, it was really understanding more from an empathy perspective again, what are the major pain points that the user is experiencing, making sure you have a really good appreciation for those. What if is addressing each of those pain points. So what if we could eliminate it so you don't have to plan your vacations around month end and we could automate those pulls of data, for example? Or what if you didn't have to manually compile from 5 different ERPs on a daily basis and we can have one data warehouse that has all of that information in it for you? So the what if was really eliminating the pain points. What wows is what feeds innovation. So in that section, it's really asking your users questions of, if anything were possible, give me your wish list with no restraints. And a lot of times the things our users brought up were out of the box functionality with one of our tools, and we were able to easily implement that and give them what they want. And they were thrilled, and it gave IT a little bit more buy-in as well. So it was really helpful. And then in the what works is kind of a final culmination of, we might not be able to give you exactly everything in your what wows, but it'll be a nice combination of some of the pain points that we're eliminating with some new functionality to make it usable too. So after we implemented design thinking, we saw such an uptick in our users who were actually using the analytics out of the tools that we provided them and stopped going offline as much as they did, which was just incredibly inspiring to see, and we gained a lot more faith, I think, with our business partners too. So definitely a win-win.
That's awesome. And it seems like we've heard a lot about design thinking today from our submissions that involve data visualization, and even some of ours that didn't really focus specifically on data visualization. So I'd like to ask, so how do you think design thinking really helps to impact and improve the decision-making process?
Yeah, I love that question. I think it helps because it's taking another look of how you would traditionally gather requirements. So I think a lot of companies, like Eaton did in the past, are kind of always asking, well, what do you do today? And okay, so we're just going to replace the tool, but we're not going to replace the process or the decisions that you're making from that data. And to me, that's kind of a misstep and a trap that's very easily to fall into. So when you use design thinking and you understand those pain points, then you can understand how are you making their job easier, how are you making it better, And when you gain that bit of trust, then you can get real requirements of, okay, why are you asking these questions, and what are you really hoping to gain that you may have not have shared with us in the past? So I think design thinking is really just a way to gain credibility and to truly understand, if you were in that same role, would you want to be doing that job? And if not, how can you make it better? And by doing that, then the data comes over easier, and you can start to really make more actionable decisions off of it.
That's a lot of really good points. So you spoke about that iteration process, and it seems like, at least from my experience in data projects, that could be a sort of long process to getting that final project that final project to be functional. So how do you stay encouraged during that iteration process when something doesn't work as intended, or when your users aren't using it and enjoying it the way you hoped?
To me, I think it's kind of a pay me now or pay me later scenario. So, I think a lot of companies too were using more of a waterfall approach, where you get all of your requirements really early on in the project, and then you work for 3 to 6 months or whatever it takes to develop it, and then you do one UAT cycle right before it goes live. And what we found with that is a lot of times we did go live, but then nobody was actually using it. So although the iteration might seem like it's taking longer because you're developing based off of maybe a very small set of requirements and then showing it to the users in maybe a mini UAT or a conference room pilot along the way, it might seem that gets stretched out a little bit in the timeline. But to me, it's, you're doing things more upfront on the front end. And so by the time you get it to the final UAT, everybody actually knows what they're doing. They know what questions to ask, and they know that it's going to be workable for them. So to me, even if it does take slightly longer, it's such a good payoff, because you're giving the users something that they are actually going to be using on a daily basis, and not, using maybe one part of the functionality and then taking things offline and doing their own thing too. So yes, it's a little bit more upfront, but incredibly, I'd say a huge savings on the back end of the project.
That's a really good way to think about it. So what sort of results did you see, or reactions did you see, that let you know that that design thinking approach was working and was working really well?
Yeah, to be honest with you, it did take a little bit of time, because it is so vastly different than how we had done things for a number of years. So we did have some naysayers at the beginning that wanted us to keep it the old way, where we gather everything up front, where we have one UAT cycle. But I think the results really spoke for themselves when we would make small changes along the way of things that used to cost our business time to put in change requests, and then they'd have to find more funding to pay for enhancements and things after go live. Now they could see it actually built into the project, and that they could get value out of it immediately in the project. So I'd say really one of my favorite quotes from a user too was, they actually said, if you would have given us everything that we asked for in the first 2 weeks of the project, there's no way I would have used anything, and there would have been no value in this whatsoever. And they said after we did the iterative approach and they were able to make tweaks along the way and kind of adjustments, they had an incredibly high adoption rate. They had a higher user satisfaction rate, and it's something that's still in production today. And I think that's what really pays for itself when they see that there is value in it, that people are using it, that they don't have to spend extra money for enhancements. Then they became excited about it and became kind of evangelizers for this process with other parts of our business too, to say, yes, it is different. It's a little bit unconventional. It's not normal to talk about feelings and, have kind of the empathetic viewpoint a lot of times in IT. But when you do humanize it a little bit, what a big difference it makes. And people recognize that, I would say, after a couple rounds of doing this in the projects.
That's great. It sounds like most sort of new things you're trying to implement, there's a little bit of hesitation, but I'm glad to hear that people seem to really accept it and see the benefits of it, because I agree. And I encourage everyone to read Allison's section, because it's really interesting. And she really dives into each of those sections she talks about and how they all sort of come together to culminate in the design thinking approach that really makes an impact for you. So how did you get into data visualization or creating sort of ways to communicate the data in a different way?
Yeah, I think data storytelling is something that's incredibly important too. I remember pretty early on in my analytics career too, I went to a session about data visualization, and I fully anticipated coming out of that with how to present things in colorful, cool charts and graphs. And I was very humbled. I remember at that presentation, they pulled up sports statistics, they pulled up news sites like Fox and CNN, and they showed that the most effective visuals were actually sometimes a very small table view, or even little block charts that had a number and green if it was on par for that metric, or red if it was not meeting the metric. And they talked about how many times too that visualizations are misread if they're too complicated. So I think I started on one end where I wanted to be, the latest and greatest and colorful, but kind of reined myself back in at some point when I realized that, okay, I think it's more important of having kind of a simple graphic view of something, and then also having a narrative that goes along with it. So we're showing you the data, but why is it important to you? What action can you take off of it? What decision are you looking to make? How did we derive the data? So kind of giving our users a little paragraph even attached to the visualization that really explains it. Because I think people are so inundated with data all day, every day, that it's so easy to misinterpret something. It's really incredibly easy to think that maybe it's just for information purposes and I don't need to take an action off of it. So I've been very now, I'd say, a little bit reined back, where I'm back to basics in some way, but creating a little storytelling narrative to go along with the visual. And that's been a good success as well.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like you've had a really interesting journey in learning more about Dataviz and learning out how to make the most effective visualizations that communicate to people in a way that really makes the most impact. So I want to say thank you again to Allison for being here today with us. And Allison, is there anywhere that people can follow or connect with you if they want to learn more about anything you have shared today, or just in general things you like to share?
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I am under Alison Magyari there. And then my email address is easy too, Allison Magyari, all one word, at eaton.com. So I would love to chat with you and connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I hope everyone goes out and reads your section, because it's really interesting stuff. And I think it could be helpful to anyone that's not even in data visualization, just anyone that works with data.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. All right, I think we're moving right into our next section. So our next speaker is Sravanti Valampati. She is an IT manager at Progressive. Her submission is featured in the inspiration chapter of the book, and it's titled From Information to Inspiration. You can read about it on 35, and it really gives a really interesting overview of her sort of journey in the analytics and data space, and really good details about just her thought process of it and some of the things she's experienced. And it's a really interesting read. I encourage you to go check it out on page 35. So I will turn it over to you now. And if you can give everybody a little bit of an introduction to yourself and maybe an overview of your submission.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lauren. Good afternoon, everyone. A big thank you and a shout out to Reagan, Dave, Kelsey, who worked with me from the day that we started writing and submitting and to bringing us today. I'm Sravanti Valampati. I currently am a manager at Progressive Insurance. Me as a Toastmaster, a gardener, a friend, a family person, and probably a friend to many in terms of the fraternities that I am part of. So I do have a diverse background in that my story is inspirational, and that's why I put it in that section, because I, number one, am unlike others, have no original background, or at least did not have the original background in data analytics or any kind of STEM subjects, although I did study life sciences. I studied English literature, wanted to be a teacher when I came to this country, didn't have an ounce of courage to even entertain the idea that anyone would hire a non-native speaker of English to teach English. So I said, you know what, maybe I should consider what everyone else is considering, is to check out IT. It's the last place I wanted to be. And check out IT, and here I am. So I started out as a report developer, a data warehouse developer, a little bit of SharePoint development in between, and then I became a dashboard developer, started with Microsoft tools into Tableau, brought in Alteryx into Progressive, worked on a whole spectrum of tools, worked with customers of all sort and manner here at Progressive, and some outside too. So that's my story, Lauren.
That's really interesting. So I know you go over it in depth in the submission, but sort of just a brief overview for everyone. What was your sort of path to analytics and the tech space?
My path to analytics and the tech space. So originally when I started out as a report developer. So way back when, if someone remembers, Crystal Reports was a big thing, and then we were bought over by Business Objects, Seagate Software. So that's really how I started. So what got me to where I am today is that desire to learn, facilitate, and problem solve. So it's not really the technology, it's the people aspect of it. So I think of myself as a people person with a data perspective. So I came because I wanted to solve problems for people. So it didn't matter to me that I knew a tool or didn't know a tool. If people had a problem that I could solve, or I put myself to work and deploy my whole head, heart, and hands, and that I could solve a problem, I would do it. So that's really how my technology journey started. I can't say I started out learning a technology to solve problems, but I started out with people and understanding their problems and how I really wanted to get them to a better place, because I wanted them to feel like, okay, our problems are not insurmountable. They can be solved. We can do something about them. And that's really how I took on the technology. So from where I was with report development to data warehouse development is report development was all front end. So in my mind, I wanted to dig a little deeper into the data, not just to draw from it, right? So not just inside, but where does the data reside? How does it feel? How can we capture data better? So that data cleansing, capturing, massaging, modifying data before my reports could show up the way that I wanted them to show up was the next step for me. So I started in the front end as a report developer. Then I became that data warehouse developer where I wanted to get a little deeper into data. And then as I moved into the analytics space, one of the things that our company especially was going through at that time, I apologize for the phone ringing in the background. We were going through in the background a lot of shadow IT, lots and lots of spreadsheets and access databases. And that really got me curious as to how can we go in and solve that problem. Right. So I went in from a problem solver perspective. I wasn't originally going in to tell a story, but as I understood what customers needed, as I listened to their stories, I really wanted to say, this is what I'm looking for. This is what they are looking for, and this is how I can bring their needs together with the technology. So I kind of went in not knowing what they wanted, but came out, or at least brought them out along with myself, marrying the two, their need to the technology. And I became that storyteller, the whiteboard person. So I would always go in and clean the whiteboard and say, let's get started. So that was me as I went in to solve problems. So that's how it started. And as we started to evolve more into the Microsoft Technologies world, we took most of the data that we had, because into warehouses, we brought in the whole gamut of technology and the right people at the right place doing the right thing, and we consolidated that into a platform that actually manages data and does it well today. So there's governance in place, there is good, clean data coming in, lots of it coming in, and then technology on the front end to visualize, to help dashboard. And we even have folks centralized and decentralized doing the work that makes this information turn into a business insight. So that's really how I came in, not so much from the technology perspective as most of our friends were. I came from the people perspective because not having a background, I thought was originally a handicap, but not having a background and having that people perspective to solve problems and put a smile on someone's face when we say, okay, does this help you? Did what I developed or my team developed help you? Really got me to where I am today.
That's great. That's such an interesting story. I love hearing about people with sort of non-traditional or different backgrounds that are coming into data and tech, because I think the more diverse your team can be and the more sort of varied in backgrounds the people on your team are, the better you work together, just because you have such different ways of thinking about things. And yeah, so I really appreciate that. I want to touch on one thing you said. So you started out as a teacher. So what sort of things did you learn from either your career as a teacher or in your education for that you have brought with you to the data side of things that you think help you?
So I never became a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher. So I graduated with a master's in India. And 2 months later, I was in this country. So I did not pursue a teaching career, but the teacher would never leave. So even today, I spend most of my waking hours outside of my day job teaching and coaching. So that to me brought in this aspect of mentorship, of helping people learn, because I was myself a ready learner, very hungry learner. So that mentality of teaching and coaching and educating to problem solve became the very thing that I do every day, right? Is the very thing I do every day. So what I really brought to the table with my preference for teaching or with my love of teaching is that anything can be learned. Anything can be learned, and we don't have to go about it alone. So 2 things that I learned is everything is a learned skill, right? Yes, we are all gifted or talented in some areas, right? We do have traits that are inherent to us, but most of what we do for a day job in our days is all learned. So to me, that inspiration is like, how can we take something, even if it is half-baked, even if it is gray, right? We don't know all the details. How can we take that and transform it into something useful, something insightful, something meaningful for someone? It doesn't have to be fully baked when we get started. So to me, that whiteboarding, that eliciting information, that conversation, promotion of people and their ideas, that really is the teacher in me. So I bring in all tenets I learned when I was training to be a teacher, from knowledge to understanding to application to skill development and interest, attitude, and appreciation. So I bring in all 7 steps of learning into everything I do. So that teacher in me is probably, boring some crowds as I talk to them, but definitely it helps me problem solve differently. I won't say better, but definitely differently, sometimes even faster than many people can think, because I encourage that learner in people. I encourage that mentorship in people. And I say, if you're looking for a career, no matter where it is, whether in data analytics or outside, go out, seek mentors or mentor others. That's the best way to learn, is to mentor others or continually seek someone that can give you more, that can speak to you, that can help you understand where your strengths are perhaps and what you could be doing with them while working on your opportunities on the side. So I'm a big believer in Strengths Finder. So I say, go far with your strengths. We all have them.
That's great. I really love the point you made that anything can be learned. And we actually got a question from the audience that's sort of relevant for that, if you can pop that up. So how were you able to learn enough of these sort of tech and data skills when you came in from a more liberal arts background?
Absolutely. To me, I draw from within. I know not everyone agrees, but I draw from within. So we don't need special talent to learn something. All we need really is that desire to get to that next step. And that's where I go with, throw some books at me. I'm willing to learn. I throw some resources at me. I'm willing to learn. And I'm myself going to seek out mentors. And that's why I say it's important learning sake, as opposed to saying, I have this particular mindset, I'm good for these things. I say genuinely, yes, some of us are gifted, some of us are way above average in some areas, and that's probably how our propensity leads us to, or where it leads us to. But absolutely, it's a learned skill. I have a master's in English literature. I have a life sciences background. I specialized in special education. But today, I utilize it in the tech world, right? So I meld the two. I take technology to people. I bring people to technology. And even though I don't develop dashboards or build data warehouses, as I lead my talented team, I'm always pushing them to look for data, look for the other side of data, the people aspect of data, right? Seek data to drive value and help themselves develop those aspects of insight and data that can help them get to a better place, that can help the team get to a better place. So to me, it is a learned skill. Right? I did not have the tech background. I did not have what I thought it took to get into IT and be successful, but I've built a career around it. It's been 25 years now. And although I don't actively do data analytics, I mentor, I coach folks in data analytics. I sponsor and promote folks in data analytics. I stay very engaged with my previous home, which is the data management and analytics platform at Progressive, although I've moved away from it. So these are some of the ways that we have opportunities to continue our learning, to continue doing what we love doing, and to continue to promote people and their aspirations in the areas that they love to be in.
That's a great answer. I really love just your sort of viewpoint on learning and how you can sort of share that journey with others. It's really, really cool to hear. And it's great to hear people in the data space that want, or in just the tech space in general, that want to share that sort of love of learning and that love of technology with others. So I want to thank you so much for being here and speaking with us today. And is there anywhere that people, if they want to follow you or connect with you, can find you online?
I'm so excited. So many have already connected with me over LinkedIn. So thank you. Thank you for that. You can find me on LinkedIn, Shravanti Valampati. I will also leave my email address here. I'm also on Facebook. So Facebook and LinkedIn, I'm in both places. And if
Awesome.
you can give me some context as to how you're connecting or why you're connecting, that would help me.
Thank you so much for joining us, Franthi.
Thank you, Lauren.
And I'm going to turn it back over to Reagan and Kelsey.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lauren. I've got a couple of announcements, or one major announcement actually, for everybody that's tuned in right now. So great timing on tuning in. We're going to announce a discount code for the upcoming conference. So like I said in the beginning of the live stream, every year we host a conference in Columbus, Ohio. This year it will be hybrid. So we'll actually have a virtual option as well. But we really hope you can attend in person if you're able to. It's going to be a great event, lots of similar conversations to the ones that you're hearing today. So if you can make it to Columbus, Ohio, we would love to meet you in person. And we're also going to give you a discount code for a ticket to the event as well. So the conference itself is called the Data Connect Conference, and the website is dataconnectconf.com, or you can go to womenandanalytics.com and find the link through that as well. Our discount code will give you 10% off of the ticket, which is a pretty significant chunk. And so if you enter in WIA Coffee Combos into the discount section during checkout, you'll get 10% off. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and bring up Lori Silverman, who is our next author and speaker for today. Hey, Lori, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Reagan?
Great, great. Thanks so much for joining us. Before we get started, I do want to mention, so her section in the book is called The Unspoken Reason Behind Analytics Efforts Not Gaining Full Traction. This is in the strategy chapter, and you can find it on page 65. So before we get into our conversation, Lori, I'm going to have you do an introduction and talk about a couple of things if you want to plug any of the things that you have going on right now, where people can find you or engage with you, because you're an extremely engaging person in the community. So definitely worth a follow if you are interested in some of the topics she's going to talk about today. And then maybe a little bit of inspiration as to why you chose the topic, and then we'll jump into a combo.
Absolutely. So my career in this area started when I was in my early 30s, and I was organization development consultants managing teams of statisticians. And our job in organizations was to actually help them find value in their data and to transform them. And we did that for many, many years, for over a decade. And then I kind of switched a little bit and added more strategy and futuring work to my background. But then in 2013, it came back full circle when I wrote a book with a colleague called Business Storytelling for Dummies. And in that book, we wrote a chapter called What to Do with Data. It came out in December of 2013. And the following year, I sat back and I said, I should go look at what people in the data analytics field are doing and what sorts of changes have been made over the years. And I was absolutely surprised. I saw gap after gap after gap, things that I thought we had closed years earlier, such as the data storytelling field not acknowledging narrative story, business storytelling as being a tool for communication, or there being no methods for data-informed decision-making. And that culture was a huge issue, and people did not know how to transform organizations. And I thought to myself, well, how can this be? Because we've been doing this work for years. What happened along the way? How did it get lost? But there was something else that really stood out to me. And I think that this makes me perhaps a little bit different than others in the field. And that is, I believe we're focused on the wrong thing. I believe we're bringing the wrong mindset to the situation. And I looked recently at the 10th annual New Vantage Partners research, because in the chapter I cited from the 8th annual report. And in the 10th annual report, my feelings were actually confirmed. We are not going forward when it comes to implementing a transformed culture in organizations. We're going backwards. And I really believe, and this is the crux of my chapter, is that our challenge is we're focused on the data. We're focused on being data-centric, when what we really need to do is focus on the use of that data, which some of the speakers have talked about today. But I'm talking about a decision-first mindset, a decision-first paradigm. And that's the culture we need to bring into organizations. There are hundreds and thousands of decisions being made every single day by every single person in the organization, but they have no methodology. We haven't thought about how do we make this a core competence? Because if we were to give people skill sets to make better decisions, I want you to think about a couple things. There's a monetization piece to this that's really huge. And that is, what's the cost of making a wrong decision? Second, what's the cost of taking a lot of time to make a decision, like weeks and weeks and months and months? And third, what's the cost of making a right decision and never getting it implemented, or maybe only getting it implemented part way? So I think that we need to start looking at how do we create the core competence within organizations so that everyone can make better decisions faster and get them implemented so that we can see the value realized from the data that we're all bringing forward.
I love that. And I'm going to start with one of the stats you quoted in your section. So you said in 2019, 32% of 190 US execs are able to create measurable value. 27% said DNA projects produce actionable results. And this is after 20 years. So this was, to put that into context, this is after a lot of work trying to mature this. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Well, actually, we're going backwards. So there's less and less. That's what the New Vantage research is showing us. In fact, they say, when will there ever be good news on what I'm going to call the human side of data analytics? So where we seem to be making our gains is on the technology side. But what's really missing is understanding how to help people use the data that we're giving them in the decision-making process, how to get them to actually make a decision. Because I hear people saying today, I bring forward all this wonderful information, then it's never used. And then how do we actually implement the results of what they're doing? So I think, to me, it's a much bigger issue in terms of the protective nature of what we're doing. But the challenge is this: until we shift our mindset up here, I want you just to think about the words, for example. Instead of saying data management, what if I were to say decision management? Instead of saying data strategy, what if I were to say decision strategy? Instead of saying data literacy, what if I were to say decision literacy? Or instead of saying data quality, what if I were saying decision quality? Because here's the difference. If I say those things and I start to focus on them, what we do is we create a pull from people for the data. Because if they need to make better decisions and they need to implement them and their careers are based on that, you know, in terms of how they're evaluated going forward, they're going to demand the data from us, and they're going to demand clean data, and they're going to demand data governance, and they're going to demand all these things. So I think we kind of put the cart before the horse, which is why the results you cited and the results we're seeing today, you know, nothing's going forward. It's going backwards. It's as though we've regressed the last couple of years with COVID. It's very sad.
Yeah, and I think to talk to that too, you and I have had many conversations about this. You know, people are always approaching it technology first, and it's really interesting. You know, you also called out in your section too that the first instinct is to blame the people, right? So we're talking about technology and advancements in technology and capabilities on that realm. Tons of venture capital investments there, people pushing technology as the solution, and then we also want to blame the people. We don't have enough champions for these projects. But what is the real root of the problem? You're saying decisioning, but is it a lack of knowing how to create a decision framework or methodology, or what is the root of that?
Well, people can put this into the comments. I'd be very interested to see this. Who in their organization has a documented step-by-step approach for collaborative, data-informed decision-making that is taught to every single person in the organization? That is issue number one. I mean, we've developed a methodology going back to 2015 that we call How to Make Smarter Decisions with Data. And that's something that I'll be teaching in a masterclass for WIA this summer. I'm so excited to come to the conference and to come to Columbus to do that with you. And thank you for the invitation. But when I ask people, hands down, there is not a methodology. Now, I just did recently a 90-minute AMA session called Ask Me Anything with some real experts in the data field, John Thompson, Bill Schmarzo, and Samir Sharma out of the UK. And we talked about this very issue. It's like, where are these methodologies? And people in the comments said, well, it's just the scientific method. And I'm like, no, it's not the scientific method. That's where the dilemma is, because we have to teach people how to blend data with intuition. We have to teach people where, you know, data storytelling is phenomenal for uncovering insights. But then you have to switch to narrative business storytelling. And, you know, there's a ton of brain research around that we just seem to ignore, and we don't make that leap. And then we wonder why we're not getting people to do things. And so to me, it's like, it's bigger than the scientific method. But, you know, who has it? Where is it documented? Show it to me, and show me that you teach it to other people. Because in the data literacy arena, for the most part, 99% of the time, what you find people being taught is data visualization, statistics, analytics, and other sorts of things, but not the piece that I'm talking about. And so I will continue to be passionate about this for as long as I can. And I appreciate the opportunity to do so.
We need that. We need people who keep bringing this up, because to your point, like, it gets lost in all of the other conversations around the next tool that's going to help us deploy models into production, right? Which is still important, but like not in the grand scheme of things if you don't have some of the fundamentals that you're talking about. And it's funny too, people, there's some really great comments. I don't know if you're able to read them, but they're so awesome. There's a couple of folks that are putting 0 because you asked how many people inside of their organization have documented this process. One person said, "Can I intern for you?" So yeah, you definitely have a really great mindset around this. And I think it's super important to keep beating that drum, because every engagement that I'm in, even with some of my clients, it's, you know, can we answer this question? Okay, but why does that question matter? If I look at like the layers of why, they're stuck in the middle. Like, they still ask why, they still want to know, but they don't bring it all the way up. Is there some, you mentioned this kind of like framework or decision first culture. Could you give a teaser to a couple of the folks on like some of the fundamentals that you usually include, so they can, you know, start to wrap their head around what that means?
Well, I think that what you've been describing is what we call the essence smarter. It's how do you set the context, right? And that's a really key piece for how you start getting information out of anybody to actually decide whether or not we should move ahead with doing an analytics initiative. But I think what's missing from that piece is what I would call story prompts, because questions will not get you what you need from people. People filter the responses to questions. If we ask a story prompt and we actually get the story from people, they don't filter. And so if I say something to them like, tell me about the situation where you are planning to use the results of this initiative, or tell me about a problem that is the most typical that you're trying to solve, you get far richer and deeper information about what you're trying to do. And you also figure out if they've made a decision, because quite frankly, if they've already made a decision and they're just trying to back into this and say, well, people are telling me I have to use data, I say to folks, go ahead, implement, go implement. Because it's not worth my time to do what you're asking me to do. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh my gosh, I could never say that. You have to put your efforts where they're going to get you traction. That's the whole piece of this. And then as you go through that decision-making methodology, as I shared, we talk about 3 different types of insights, because there is a difference between what I'm going to call interesting insights and meaningful insights. And so what we've done in our work is we've said there are 3 different types of meaningful insights. However, in order to get those meaningful insights, that setting the context stage has to be really, 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 really clear. And then once you've done your homework around that and you get those meaningful insights, then it really becomes, what are the stories? What are the narrative stories that need to be told, that need to be crafted to get people to go, oh my gosh, we need to do something about this. And so there are 2 actually LinkedIn live shows that I did in 2020 that pertain to this. So you can look at my YouTube channel called Level Up with Lori. One is episode 8. Go listen to the brain research. I talk about it with my colleague Karen Dietz for an hour. It's unbelievable. The challenge we have is that visuals are not enough and the brain dismisses data. It's just the way we're wired. And so we've got to start using narrative. And then in episode 10, we give an overview of the smarter model and how strategic thinking is such a critical part of that as well. Not just critical thinking, not just analytical thinking. Does that kind of give you enough of a teaser?
100%. And with that, I've spent an hour talking to you before and it goes by in 5 minutes, and now 10-15 minutes goes by in 3 seconds and we're already out of time, which is crazy. And tons and tons of activity in the comments section. I want you to, so you mentioned your YouTube channel. What is the best way to follow you or connect with you?
Best way is LinkedIn. Connect to me on LinkedIn. You can also connect through my email. I'm one of the first people to use AOL, and I still use it because I have all my mail archived. So you can email me at pfprogress@aol.com. But LinkedIn is a wonderful source, and then the YouTube channel, Level Up with Lori.
Awesome. And then one last plug, Lori is doing a live workshop. You have to be there in person to attend. So it's at the conference in Columbus, Ohio, June 1st. So if you're interested in signing up for her workshop, she's going to do an entire course on decision-making and the decision-making framework and establishing one. So if you think this topic is important and you want to learn more from Lori, which who wouldn't, buy a ticket and join us in Columbus, Ohio. So thank you so much, Lori, for being here.
Thank you for your time today.
Awesome. And with that, we're going to jump on to our next speaker, Gabriella. I'm going to pull her up onto the screen. Hi, Gabriella. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi.
Before we get started, I'll just mention what the section is. So we're going to be talking about design principles today. I'm going to pull up the actual section in the book. But this was super fascinating. I know we talked a lot about design principles, and somebody asked a question in comments from a previous session that we hosted. So let me make sure I can get to the right one now. There we are. Okay. Scandinavian Design Principles for Data Storytelling, page 203. And this will be in the Data Visualization and Business Intelligence chapter. So before we get started, Gabriella, do you want us to give us a brief overview of your background, your inspiration behind the section that you wrote, and maybe a little bit of a teaser on the overview of that section.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually put together like a very quick deck. So please indulge me. I had actually a lot of fun putting this together. So hopefully it's fun for people to. Okay, hopefully my screen is being shared. If not, that's fine. It is?
Not yet. Let me see. Hold on. Down at the bottom, there's a little plus around a screen.
A little plus around my screen. Huh.
Do you see the share screen option?
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Oh man, okay. So I thought I had practiced this.
All good. I can see it.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me here. Lori's hard to follow. I'll try to do my best, but super inspired by her. And this is actually kind of on the same vein of hopefully making data science serve for decision making and not just for the joy of like playing around with code and data. So I wanted to talk about how I got to my topic, not just on the topic itself. And essentially, this is like a very quick TLDR of like what I learned, what I didn't learn, and what I'm currently trying to practice daily in order to make data science be more decision science. So real quick about me, I'm born and raised in Mexico. I did undergrad in chemical engineering. It's a bit different than studying here in the States. In Mexico, and I think in other parts of the world, you pick a topic when you go to undergrad and you do that for 5 straight years. There's no like pick and mix and like you try a few things, then you decide what you want to do, and then maybe you go to grad school. Like, no, it's 5 straight years. Chemical engineering, I was committed. Loved it, but then I graduated during the recession and there weren't that many chemical engineering jobs lying around for me to pick. So I ended up going into finance and I worked at a bank. I thought finance was my thing, and then I decided I needed a master's in finance. So I started at Berkeley. Didn't love finance, loved econ though. And I had a very good teacher at Berkeley for economics that was actually also teaching at USF as part of the initial master's in analytics, which now it's been rebranded to data science. But back when I started, it was not data science. Data science was still not the sexy name for what we do. And after that, I jumped around a few different companies in the Bay Area. And right now I am at Netflix. So along the way, what I learned is that I love the science and the engineering of it. I find it challenging. I find it fun. I love open source. Everything that has to do with like the actual grinding, great, love it. Communicating, not my forte. It's also really hard when you're not a native English speaker. And also if you're not a very visual person, like, and by what I mean by that is that there's some great verbal communicators, there's some great visual communicators. I'm really good at grinding the engineering part and not that great at communicating. But the problem is that the way that businesses work, you have to deal with a lot of very different people. And please don't at me. Like, this is a very, very oversimplified way of how I understand how businesses work. Some people guide and coordinate the thing. Engineers generally build the thing. Others, like designers, make it usable. Others sell the thing. And of course, money always controls the thing. Unfortunately, we live in a very capitalist world. But data scientists are like in the middle of this. And not only you help build the thing, you also track the thing, you measure it, you test it, you recommend, and then you have to explain how you did it, why you did it, and what the outcome was. And on top of like these business partners that you have, then you have your family and friends. So I don't know how it's been for you all, but my mom is not an engineer, nor is my dad, and trying to explain what I do sometimes is hard. The conversations either end up real quickly or they're never ending. So it's not a great conversation sometimes. So what I learned is that communication skills are just as important as engineering skills. Like, you can't really be a good or great data scientist with just one. So for people that are not familiar with Brené Brown, she's an exceptionally good communicator. I could have also placed a picture of Lori here. And if you haven't watched this meme, I highly recommend watching these. It's a little kid. I don't know if my audio will go, but this is me. You get the idea. So in order to properly translate what you have so hardly worked on and what you want to hopefully be a decision-making enabler for your team or for yourself, you need to be able to not only translate it, you need to be able to tailor your translation to your audience. And you have to somehow miraculously find the sweet spot of being not too much, not being too complex, providing enough. And what I'm currently learning is that you need this word in your life. And there's many ways of saying this, but the Swedish, and that's where Scandinavian design comes in, is lagom, which means just the right amount. And it's a beautiful word, and it has many translations in other languages, but the Swedes, I think, are the ones that came up with it, and they have it reflected all over their architecture. So lagom actually came from way back when everyone was a farmer and everyone ate from the same bowl and everyone drank from the same cup, and that bowl then and that cup needed to hold just enough for everyone to be satisfied. And lag actually means team, and on means around or about. So it's actually perfect. You need to have just enough for your team and the different members of your team. So not too little, not too much, just enough for everyone that you're talking to. And so here's the pickle. Verbal communication can sometimes be a little faster, be a little easier, because you have your face, your expressions, your hands. You can also use visual communication in combination. But if you only have your voice to communicate with, then you can use this very useful framework, which is in short PrEP, which is, I'm going to tell you what the point is. I want to tell you why the point is important. I'm going to give you an example of why it's important, and then I'm going to tell you the point again. And hopefully by the time you stop talking and just stick to those 4 things, which essentially are the same thing, your audience will leave knowing exactly what you wanted them to take away. However, when you go to visual communication, it gets a little bit more complex because you don't have your voice or your hands or your expressions to help make a point. Sometimes you have a report, sometimes you have a chart, and lagom actually comes with these 4 principles. So ideally, you want to make your content light, simple, functional, and beautiful. And by beautiful, I mean truly attractive. No one wants to be looking at anything that's boring. So I'll go through these 4 real fast. So light, white is your friend, my friends. Don't try to overclutter it. If you can take away guidelines, do it. If you can get away with having almost no numbers, and if you're having a meeting with stakeholders that are not within your group of friends that can nerd out about equations all day long, do it. It'll be your friend. And also use color sparingly, but very strongly within the lightness of what you're putting together. Make it simple as possible. You don't want to be wasting your users' attention calories on things that are not important to the point that you're trying to make. So again, take away whatever you can take away. functional. If something within your visuals have a purpose and like really help drive the point, then keep them. Like by all means, strip everything that doesn't have a purpose, but if something earns its keep, like for example here, the labels of the chart, then they should stay. And then of course, like try to make it beautiful. I know that like when you're running around all day trying to like tackle all the questions from your stakeholders, it's really hard to like be on top of a data scientist. You need to be a designer too. But if you have a very important presentation or like something that really needs attention, then I think it's worth trying to spend some time in making sure that you're using all of your tools. So highlighting, annotation, contrasts, making sure that even the title is being used as a tool. And then finally, I put together some of my favorite charts lately. I am a very big Economist daily chart fan. If you haven't checked them out, I really recommend them. These are recent ones. This one is probably like one of my favorite ones. It's so like clear and it gets the point across in like seconds after you start looking at it. Others that I really liked, the remittances, I thought it was a good one. The other one, I feel like could be somewhat of a conversation starter too. And this one's maybe like very timely, a simulation of Hungary's election. And that's it for me. That's how I got to Logom. And I actually have it in a Post-it right here every single day. So whenever I need to make sure that I put together something that is concise to the point and needs to serve a very wide variety of audiences, I try to like hold myself accountable and be a little sweet, even though I'm very Mexican.
I think this is great. I have a very similar approach or background to you in terms of like design and communicating did not come naturally to me. But I did pull out some of my favorite tips from your section. So you said question the amount of data, graphs, text, even color hues on everything you're creating. 5 or fewer insights are often ideal. I think we get wrapped up in wanting to say everything. Easy to find, easy to use, super simple, but we often forget that when we're building complex solutions. And then language should communicate facts and then communicate insights from those facts. Those were kind of my top ones from your section. And, I really appreciate you putting that deck together too, just making another visual communication cue to everybody who's tuning in. And I appreciate you spending some time with us today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the time to do my little, like, this is how I got to this level.
Yeah, it's awesome. And like I said, you can check out her section in the data visualization and business intelligence chapter inside of the book. So thank you again. And we're going to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you.
But before that, actually, we're going to do another raffle. So I'm going to pull Kelsey back on, the raffle queen. And if you haven't, or if you're just tuning in now, put the hashtag WIA coffee combos inside of the comments on YouTube or LinkedIn, and it'll automatically put you into a drawing for a free book. So obviously, we are here to talk about the Analytics Interpreted book that came out last year. All of our speakers today are authors from that book. There are 45 women authors in the book. So we have a couple more speakers coming up, which I'm super excited about. But if you haven't put the hashtag in the comments, now is your time to do that, because Kelsey is going to draw for the next winner. So just a couple of seconds, throw those hashtags in, and then...
Yeah, just a reminder, if you put your hashtag in earlier and we did a drawing, you'll want to do it again. Count starts over every time. So definitely get your counts in there. Give everyone just a few more seconds. Great. We're going to go ahead and draw our next 2 winners. Awesome. Congrats, Heather. I will reach out to you. You're joining us on LinkedIn. So keep an eye out for a message from me and we will get you your book. And we're going to do one more. Michelle, again.
Wow.
I know, crazy. She's on it today. She really should play the lottery, I think.
I know. That's crazy.
Awesome. Congrats, Natalia, who's also joining us from LinkedIn. After we wrap it up today, I will reach out to you and we will get you your book.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kelsey. And during one of the last talks, I refilled my coffee. So I always need my afternoon coffee as well. Awesome. Thank you, Kelsey. And with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So I'm going to pull Tanya here up on the screen. So welcome, Tanya. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm going to go ahead and list out your talk so people know, or your section in the book so people know where to find you. So we are in the strategy chapter, and her section is on how to prioritize analytical projects, which I know is a huge pain for a lot of people. And you can find her section on page 58. So with that, if you want to give us a quick background about yourself, what inspired you to write that section of the book, and maybe a little bit about that.
Absolutely. An honor being here. Thanks for the mug. Absolutely great presentations and hard to follow. So my background originally is from economics, and I'm not on the technical side, I guess, because I learned statistics through econometrics, and that's how I ended up in the financial services, where I spent a couple of years, got into a huge international crisis, and ended up in the MBA program with a marketing degree. And after I joined a retail company in the marketing department, it turned out that I knew how to do numbers and how to do statistics, and that's where I ended up in marketing analytics. So I did a lot of market research early on, but as the tools have developed to analyze more and more of the transactional data, I retooled my data set and my skill set, and ended up in the more on the transactional analysis of different programs, as well as data engineering and understanding how to take the data from the raw file into the decisions, as Lori's been talking about for so long, and I cannot say how important it is. The data is only good if you make decisions with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you've got a lot of really great sections inside of your section. And I want to talk about this a little bit in terms of prioritization, because oftentimes I see a lot of organizations that really, really struggle with this, mainly because they aren't taking into consideration a lot of those points that you make throughout the section. It's usually a lot of politics that gets inserted into prioritization of, like, let's answer this question first, or my question's more important, or I need to make up a lot of these requests to you so that I can get access to the data. Can you pull this for me? And oftentimes questions aren't formatted properly. And so I do see a lot of this as a huge challenge inside of an organization, and especially people who don't own that process of prioritizing things across different groups or different departments even. One of the first things that you say is that prioritization is a way to connect business objectives with the reality of analytical work. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is, again, communication is the most important thing. Of course, we want to understand what kind of data we have and what can we do with it, as well as what's most important, what's going to help organizations make better decisions. So we have decisions on one side, and we have the reality of analytical work, which is the data itself and the efforts that it takes to turn it into valuable information. And how do we bring it together so that the result is usually means more money for the company, but the metrics could be different. Metrics could be higher satisfaction, helping more people. The public sector, the nonprofit sector may have different objectives. So this is why the factors that I'm including in the prioritization come from both sides. So what is the value of this answer? What kind of decision you can make with it? What is the feasibility? I mean, are you even going to be able to answer the question? Sometimes we either don't have the data, or we just don't know how to approach this question in an answerable way at this moment, and we have to maybe do more work before we even get there. What is the urgency? That's an important one, because a lot of times when you don't have prioritization, the way you decide to take on projects is in an order of urgency.
I love your quote in the section too. You said, "I've never met a non-urgent request."
Yes. So, and marketing analytics full of it, because I need this list today. I need this list today. It needs to go out tomorrow. There are requests that are very urgent, and we have to take it into consideration. However, if we keep on deciding based on just urgency, a lot of times we get into this rut where we are just kind of working on projects and producing the same things over and over again without moving forward. So being aware of that, just being aware of that helps. Again, on the analytical side, effort, how much effort it is, how well integrated. This is more important now than it used to be. The integration of our solution or answer into everything else that the company does. If we produce a model, can it be used? Is it actually helping us achieve better results? It's all about how the data fits the decision, and how the solutions fit the company. And I really love the last one, which was building solutions that help you build other solutions, or building answers that help you build other answers. And anybody who's done any work in the either data engineering modeling side understands what it means. Is that I wish we had that. If we had that, we could build upon it and get our work going much faster and get better answers. So this is a huge factor, and I think everybody should consider the projects that are usually non-urgent, don't have immediate benefits, but will help you build a better and stronger solution going forward.
Yeah, and I think especially in terms of like generating a baseline too, if you're trying to do something or make a decision or create an action, we need to know what that decision, what impact that decision had. And if you don't have a baseline, you may not be able to answer that question. So oftentimes I do see that being a factor in terms of prioritization. Well, we want to do this data science project, and here's the needle we expect it to move, but we don't have a baseline of what that exists today. And we won't even be able to see how, making those different decisions might be correlated to these other metrics that we really ultimately care about. And so I think I definitely see that. One thing that I've seen be really successful inside of organizations around this as well is having an analytics steering committee, people that have representation across the organization who can have input into a lot of these topics. And I think, to your point, feasibility is one of the hardest things in terms of even data science projects. Well, that's the essence of a data science project is I've got a hypothesis and I want to test it, or I have, or it's research oriented and I'm not sure if there's anything interesting in the data, but I'll let you know. And that's the end of the project. So how have you seen, organizations successfully get through that feasibility process to understand, is this kind of a go, no go? Do we have the right data? Is it good enough? As a part of that larger ecosystem of prioritization?
That's a great question. What I usually see companies that succeed, they go out and they try things. It's just the same concept as like minimum valuable product. It's you go in and let's try doing it, see how it goes. So the prioritization aspect comes in assigning resources to projects like that. So in one of my recent projects, the crucial point at where the project was basically turned for the better, with that point where we've decided to try Snowflake and opened up the 30-day free account. And after about a week, I realized nobody had the time to play with it. And the realization that 30 days will pass and nobody will try it, and we will decide not to do it just because we haven't tried it, dawned on me, and I had to step in and say, anything, let me try anything in it. And that's when things started happening. All of a sudden, we found a solution that could do things we actually didn't expect it would do, but we were looking for that. And things started falling in places, even though wasn't that much time that was devoted to that. We just kind of went out and tried a couple of things, and we got a better sense of what the reality of the analytical process is as it refers to the goals that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, some of the points that you highlighted for anybody who's just now joining, we're already at time, so I want to make sure we're kind of summarizing your section to reiterate that. So we're talking about prioritization and within project management for analytics projects, and Tanya mentioned feasibility, the value of the answer, urgency, and to be cautious about boomerang questions when it comes to urgency, expected quality of the answer, what kind of quality do we need to have, the amount of effort, and then finally, the ease of integration into the business, or how projects can inform other projects. So I think those are really great things to consider if you're looking at implementing improvements along project management side of your organization. Definitely check out her section. It's one of the hardest things to do, in my opinion. And I think this is a great topic to cover. So Tanya, thank you so much for being here with us. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Reagan. Great to see you.
Nice to see you too. Awesome. All right, we're going to jump right into our next speaker and author. Just as a reminder for anybody who's joining, we have a hashtag that we're using for the event. It's hashtag WIA Coffee Convos. If you put that into the comment section on YouTube or LinkedIn, it will put you into a raffle to win a free book. So we'll do 2 more. We have 1 more session of that, and we'll do 2 more winners after the next couple of speakers, so towards the end of the event today. And with that, I'm going to bring up Cindy Howson. And I'm going to have, before we get started, I'm going to outline the talk that you have inside of the book. So first section is called Firsts and the Road Less Traveled. It is in the inspiration chapter, and you can find it on page 12. Hi, Cindy. How are you?
Hi, Reagan. This is the first time you and I are actually speaking live, I believe.
I know.
So great to meet you live.
Yeah, it's so nice to be able to talk to a lot of the authors too, and like go back through the sections and reread them. So I've read your section quite a few times, actually. It's one of my favorites in terms of some of the topics that you cover. Your journey is so interesting to how you got to where you're at today. And, I'm really excited for you to share some of that with the audience that we have.
Yeah, thank you, Reagan. So I also have to set the stage. You and Dave Cherry proposed this idea of a book, and it was June 2020, like in the throes of COVID, the start of the pandemic. And it's like, I could either write something really technical, or I at that point in time, we were, that it was the pandemic, and then it was the social injustices, and we were trying to get a relationship with an HBCU school over the line even before this started. And so there was a lot of that in my mind, like just reflecting back on time, I think, as we do when the world is turned upside down. So I know the book came out like a year later, but what was I thinking in June 2020, I think is important.
Yeah, 100%. I know it's crazy because Dave and I talked about it like December of 2019. We were like, this would be a cool idea. And so we were like on track, getting submissions. And then of course, everything unfolded. So, but it's awesome that we got so many submissions that we did. So I kind of want to touch on your background a little bit. You mentioned in your section that your first project was in 1993, working with IT to create a global data warehouse and BI deployment, which is crazy because a lot of people are still doing a lot of these core concepts. Can you talk about that a little bit and how you got to that place?
Yeah. And I think it's a concept, what I wanted people to take away is that your path in this space may not be linear. I like this term that somebody used last week. It's not a ladder, it's a maze. Now, a maze has some dead ends, and I don't think I've ever had a dead end. But the global data warehouse was leading edge. The only resources on the market at that point in time was one book by Bill Inman. And the vendors that we were working with at this point in time, SAP, Oracle, IBM, they told us we were crazy, don't even try and do this. But we, as a company, we wanted to operate globally, not have these regional DSS decision support systems on the mainframes, very siloed, inflexible, brittle. And so that was the first data and analytics project that I worked on that was global. And it stood the test of time, really 25 years. It helped when Dow did an acquisition with Union Carbide. It actually helped them beat the Wall Street expectations for executing on some of the synergies. And everyone I worked with on that project has gone on to do incredible things. I look at Melanie Kelmar, she was my counterpart in supply chain. She is now the CIO of Dow Chemical. Armin Pressler, he was my co-lead with some of the analytics infrastructure, and he became a serial entrepreneur. So it was definitely a lot of firsts there.
Yeah, that's amazing. We were having a lot of chatter in the comments too around another author who was talking about her path coming from a liberal arts background into analytics. And I see this so often. I see all different, paths to get into this space. So I think you're so right. One of the big things that I loved about the section of your book, and it's a constant reminder, and in fact, I should probably print it out and stick it on my wall, is this, if not me, then who? And I just resonated with that so much. I think we often come across a lot of challenges, especially in this space when a lot of it's new and no one knows the right way to do it, and we're still trying to figure it out. Can you talk a little bit about that quote and what that means to you?
Yes, if not me, then who? And I was actually going to read to you from pages from that journal. But we won't do that right now. And because also I have been repeating that to myself in the last year as well, the last 2 years, because my current job is also, it's pioneering work and a pioneering role. And this was Dave Kepler, who he was the CIO, or he got promoted to CIO, but he was our project manager on the global data warehouse. And he and as well as the business sponsors, Bob Lee, Eddie Wilson, said to me, if you can't do this, who can? And so I had to give myself pep talks. And that's where I would write in my journal the skills that made me uniquely qualified to do this. One is that I like problem solving. 2 is I like to read. So I was teaching myself always tech. And 3 is that I really understand both the business and the technology. And we are still trying to do this. It's combining the two. How can data and analytics solve a business problem? Not throwing data and analytics out there for technology's sake. And so that was what uniquely qualified me. And it was hard, but fun.
I love that. I think that's, something that we can continuously remind ourselves of again and again. One of the other things that I loved about your background too is that you left and ended up going to get your MBA. And that's a really challenging decision for a lot of people to make in their career, is to pause and, move into kind of that academic mindset and really take on something new and learn something new. And I'd love to hear about your kind of decision making around that and what that did for you from a career perspective.
Yes. So if you don't mind, I'd love to share this screen. If part of this goes back to what did I want to be when I was little, when I grew up. If you want to, whoever's like your producer, if you add, I think you have to control displaying the screen. All right. So this is little Cindy, probably 4th grade, 5th grade. And that's when I wrote my first book, a pop-up book. So I made names down there that was rated #1 by the kindergarten class that we had to read it to. And so my goal was to be a writer. And I kind of fell into technology because in college I was a lousy typist and networking was new and the network kept losing my documents. I'm like, well, where did they go? And so I felt like I needed to go back to school to shore up my technical skills. And so that's what I did after my first child was born and after the Global Data Warehouse project was up and running. And so this is my daughter with me and my niece graduating Rice University. I went back to get my MBA, Master's in Information Systems, to fill in the knowledge gaps. And I did think I would leave the field at that point in time, but it gave me a renewed focus. And so this was then I was the first working mother in the Deloitte office at that point in time in Texas. And so every chapter, I think it's what's the hard choice, but how do I have maximum impact in the time that I have available? And all of that, it's chapters. And so it was hard choices also for me to leave Gartner and go to a startup, really. Now I'd call them a scale up at ThoughtSpot. But I think it's, again, getting to that maximum impact. So you can stop sharing maybe, or do I hit that? Thanks.
I got it. Yep. Yeah, that's awesome. I think our careers end up taking tons of turns that maybe sometimes we don't anticipate. You know, I personally quit my full-time job. My last day of work was March 13th, 2020. So the timing wasn't great. But it ended up being awesome because I could go heads down and you know, really start this startup that I started with my 2 co-founders. And it's just crazy how timing and you know, certain decisions on taking the leap. Again, it was that moment of not if not me, then who moment. And I love that. And one of the things you said in your section too is measuring your career success by the people who had an impact. And I love that. I think that's incredible. And it's one of the biggest motivators for me specifically. Is there something specific from your career that kind of inspired you to think about it that way?
Yeah, I think it's more my goals have never been like a job title. And I worked 3 jobs to stay in college. So much of my goal has just been, how do I give a better life than the one I had? And then if I think, what is the work I do around data and analytics, I do see and work with companies that it makes their businesses better and it makes the world better. I do think we're at a dangerous time that if we don't get this right, it actually can do more harm than good. And this is why I want more people from diverse backgrounds, whether it's by women, ethnicity, age, region, to get into this space and to stay in this space. So I think of an engineer that we brought on as an intern, and she was nervous. She was nervous because she was ethnically diverse. She had difficulty speaking publicly, but it's just creating that environment where we can all succeed. Even yesterday, I did a workshop with some college students and high schoolers sponsored by another great organization, the Wilda Academy. And this woman was from Spain, and she told me, you are the first woman I have met in data and analytics. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. That's terrible. We have to fix that. But in her field of work in Spain, there's not a lot of men. So these are the people that I will remember, who I hopefully paid it forward to. And then it's the people that have given me a chance, probably when I doubted myself, and yet they believed in me more than I did.
I love that. I'm going to close us out with one more thing that I loved from your section too. Dream big, internal voices are the harshest critics. And I couldn't agree more. So thank you so much for being here with us. If the audience wants to connect with you or hear more from you, how can they do that?
LinkedIn. And tell me you connected through Women in Analytics. So
great.
Thank
and
you
you
for
have a
having me,
podcast.
Reagan.
You have a podcast.
Oh, and the Data Chief podcast. Yes. Every other Wednesday. And then my next in-person trip is for Thoughts Beyond in Las Vegas. I love meeting people in person as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cindy. I appreciate
Thank you, Reagan.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And we've got one more speaker that I will queue up. So I'm going to bring Avashan onto the screen and do a quick introduction of Avashan. So her section is in the case study section. It's the last chapter of the book. And her section is called Promoting Peacekeeping Efforts via Machine Learning, a New Age Tool for Conflict Prevention. And that will be on page 236. Avashan, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thank you very much, Reagan, for having me here. Women in Analytics has been a family for me while I've been working at the United Nations. It often feels lonely when you're a woman doing analytics, you work on data. And Women in Analytics has always been the place for me to connect and reach out to other women who are doing amazing work, as you all have been listening to them right now. So it's again an honor for me to be here. And I'm here to answer all your questions you have. Maybe I'll start with an intro so the audience get to know me. So I'm Avashan. I work in United Nations Department of Peacekeeping Operations. I'm from Tehran in Iran. And growing up in Iran, I witnessed the conflict, the war between Iran and Iraq, and that always had this impact on me that I don't want to see any other child ever living in conflict. And that's why I decided to join United Nations. So growing up in Iran, I had pen friends and I had pen pals all over the world. But I had to write letters and I had to wait for these letters to be sent, and it would take like 2 months to hear back from my pen pals. And the day that I switched into email, I saw the impact of technology on how it can really connect people, connect lives, create a culture, a global culture in the world that we live in. And that's why I decided to pursue my education in computer software engineering. So I pursued my education in software engineering, and I got a master's in information technology management, still having the dream of working at the UN. So when I joined the UN in 2010, I was working as a database administrator. So I actually started as a highly technical, I would say geeky, techie person. But when I joined the UN, I realized that I need to understand what's going on. I need to understand the politics. I need to understand international relation concepts so that I can connect and communicate with the substantive side. So I started a second master in Middle Eastern studies that kind of took me away from that binary mindset and gave me a much better understanding of how to do conflict analysis and how to understand the driving forces behind conflict. And that equipped me with a much better strength as a data information management person in the UN that can really connect the dots and provide analytics products that help solve problems and save lives, because that's what we are doing in UN peacekeeping. I don't know if the audience here knows about UN peacekeeping operation and the work that UN peacekeeping operation has been doing over the years. The first peacekeeping operation was established in 1948 in the Middle East, and ever since there's been more than 70 peacekeeping operations in conflict zone in very difficult conditions. We have troops that are deployed from 125 countries, military personnel and civilians working side by side to implement the Security Council mandate to bring peace, to help support women and children in the conflict, to disarm the groups that were armed and they were part of the conflict, and to help support communities and create coexistence between the nations. So that's where I'm at right now. I'm focusing on a project to use data to help support situational awareness in peacekeeping for enhanced mandate implementation, protecting lives of civilians as well as lives of our peacekeepers who are working in really hostile conflict environments. And I do travel to conflict zones a lot as well. So, but right now I'm based in New York.
Wow. Every time I hear your background, I'm always like in awe of the work that you do. It's so impactful, so incredible. I mean, what an amazing way to use data to really have an impact on the world. Your section covers a lot of really interesting, technical components of what you do as well, which I think is fascinating. So you beautifully articulated the impact of the work that you do. And I think how you do it is also very fascinating because you're often dealing with a lot of really challenging data structures and data sources. Can you speak to that a little bit and what you have experienced in terms of the type of data that you use?
Sure. Thank you, Reagan, for your question. So we do have a lot of challenges in data collection. You can imagine areas where we operate. I mean, South Sudan or Democratic Republic of Congo, North Mali. These are areas that are remote. Access to internet is really difficult. Connectivity is really low. So we can't really rely on individuals to add data into systems because we do have these serious connectivity challenges. So we have to be innovative. One of the challenges that we see is that more and more climate change is becoming a conflict driver. By floods or droughts that we see in Africa, we are seeing that it's causing inequalities, and these inequalities cause conflict. But now, I mean, even with Google Earth, for example, you see that satellite imagery is becoming more democratized. So these images are now they're available to us. But humanly, it's possible to go look at these images one by one to see where we see the impact of climate change on a local community. So with using machine learning, image recognition algorithms, we are now able to run models that can analyze the impact of climate change on different areas and act as a sort of a early warning mechanism to prevent future conflicts that climate change might cause. So this is one example of really how machine learning can help enable analysis of millions and millions of images that can help improve lives by protecting the future conflict, by acting as an early warning mechanism. I mean, more examples in the areas where there is social media. Of course, it's always important to monitor social media, monitor the trend, especially like the status of women and girls in most countries, to see like the challenges that they are facing it, and look at the sentiment around it. And again, nowadays with the blizzard of information that's coming to us, it's really important to be equipped with the right algorithms, right models to be able to analyze this information. And as all the speakers said, getting valuable insight that then can be used for policy making and can be used to take action upon. And that's the main goal. I just wanted to mention that I was one of the co-leads of United Nations Secretary General's data strategy. And as you know, peacekeeping operations has been there since 1948. And it's been recently that we started looking into data to be more agile and data driven. And to that note, we came up with the strategy that we drafted, and we can share the link with you in the chat if you would like to take a look at it. So it really shows where we are going at, what's the aim, and what's the goal with data strategy for the Secretary General to have a more agile, data-driven, data-informed United Nations and peacekeeping operations.
Yeah, that's great. And Kelsey is going to drop the link in the chat too, so everybody has access to that. So thank you for that resource and sharing that with people. One of the other things that I think is really fascinating about the work that you do is, you mentioned some of the technical challenges of the data that you work with and the impact that you have, but you also mentioned how crucial the human element is to ensure accuracy. You touched on this a little bit, which includes political affairs officers. What can you give a little bit more information to us on that specifically?
Sure. Thank you for this question. And absolutely important to always consider the human aspect of the data work you're doing. When it comes to conflict analysis, predictive analysis in peacekeeping operations, it's absolutely crucial to include the human factor. In machine learning, you can design unsupervised algorithms. It might work maybe for a trading floor, but when it comes to humanitarian work, it's important to involve the political affairs officers, lawyers, human rights officers, child protection officers, women advisors who are working in deep field to look at the data, first of all, that you're training your algorithms on. Often the data that algorithms are trained on come with biases. So it's really important to make sure that those biases are removed. Us as data specialists are not always aware of those biases. It's absolutely crucial to talk to the subject matter experts to ensure the data sets that you're using for training algorithms are unbiased. And that you can do sitting side by side the experts, subject matter experts to understand. In many countries in Africa, it's often the men in the family who have the cell phones, and they're the ones who post and tweet. So you might not get a female perception on social media. So it's really important to be aware of these biases and also the ethics and privacy challenges when you're collecting data from vulnerable population. So these are all absolutely important to take into consideration when working with data, regardless of the industry that you're in, because ethics, privacy is absolutely crucial to any data analytics or AI work. Thank you.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I've had today is just the level of importance. Is just a reminder on the contextualization of what we're doing and what we're solving and really tying it into the bigger picture. So I appreciate you going through that with us. And if you also want to catch Avashan's talk from last year's conference, it's recorded and on our membership platform. So she gave a talk last year. And for any of the standard members on the platform, you can watch her talk there as well. So I want to thank you so much for being here with us today. This was a great event, and I really appreciate your participation.
Thank you very much for having me here. It's always a pleasure to be with this community and seeing all these wonderful women like yourself doing such great work with data and analytics. So thanks for having me here. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. My Twitter handle is Avishan, Avishan, and looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to close out the event. We have one more raffle, so stick around if you're interested in seeing the results of that. I'm going to pull Kelsey back up onto the screen, and then we'll get the next couple of winners announced.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah. So get your last few entries in here. I'll give everyone just a few more seconds to get in there. Thanks so much for everyone for coming today, especially our authors. I appreciate all the time and effort they put in with coordinating this with us, and we are super excited.
Yeah, and while we're waiting for folks to put their hashtags in, which make sure you do so that you can get entered into this round for the raffle. Just as a reminder, our conference is coming up in person and virtual. There's both options on June 2nd and 3rd. The workshops will be on June 1st. So if you are planning on attending in person, you have the opportunity to attend a workshop with Noelle Silver, who was one of our keynotes from last year, as well as Lori Silverman, who you saw today. They're both hosting workshops. And so those are going to be available on our website. So if you head to dataconnectconf.com, you can get your workshop ticket there, your virtual ticket there, or your in-person ticket there as well. And we have a discount code, which we will flash up again after we announce the winners. So
perfect.
Drum roll.
Winner.
I'll do the music, I promise. Next
Probably
time we get
Michelle again. No.
I know.
Awesome. Congrats, Kara, who is joining us on LinkedIn. I will find you on LinkedIn and we will get your book sent out for you. We've got one last winner here.
I like that the confetti sticks around for a
I
while.
do too. It's not like the party continues on.
The party keeps going.
Awesome. And then congrats, James, who is also joining us on LinkedIn. I will keep an eye out for a message from me and we will get you your book.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to thank everyone for tuning in. This was, again, our first live stream event, so hopefully this was valuable. It was 3 hours of incredible content from 12 of the authors of the 45 authors in the book. So just thank you so much for tuning in, participating, commenting, connecting with one another. This was an incredible event. And just as a reminder to the discount code for the conference, it is WIA Coffee Combos, same thing as the hashtag. When you go to checkout, just look for that discount code box, stick it in there, and it'll give you 10% off. So, and then Kelsey also posted the community platform in there too. It's community.womenandanalytics.com. You can join for free. We have tons of conversations just like this one on the platform as well. So, Kelsey, thank you for coordinating on the back end. I appreciate it, and coordinating all the logistics of the event. And then thank you all again for joining us today.
Thanks so much, everybody.
We'll see you at the next one.